Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Matthew Terry. A woman called 911 from Lithia, a suburb of Tampa, Florida. She reported hearing screams from a nearby house and discovered an injured woman with a severe neck wound, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe. It seemed that the attacker may have escaped into the woods upon hearing someone approaching the house. To start, let's get to know Kay Baker, a resident of Lithia, Florida, where she lives with her two sons. Kay Baker, 43, is a third-grade math and science teacher at Cypress Creek Elementary School in Ruskin. On the night of May 28, 2022, which was a quiet and warm evening, her neighbors, Jonathan, was sleeping peacefully on his sofa while his wife and children were also fast asleep. Shortly after midnight, Jonathan was startled awake by sounds that he later described as a scream, the sound of someone falling to the floor, and the sound of someone choking. Initially, he thought one of his daughters had fallen out of bed, so he went upstairs to check, only to find that everyone was still fast asleep. Jonathan decided to investigate the sounds outside and discovered a woman lying face down in his front yard. This woman was later identified as Kay Baker. She was in a pool of blood that appeared to be coming from her neck. While Jonathan checked on her, he heard a noise behind him. He turned to look toward the rustling in the woods behind his house but saw nothing. He then asked his wife, Ruth Figgins, to call 911. Unfortunately, by the time rescue workers and deputies from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrived, Kay had already died. Medical examiners at the scene found multiple stab wounds on her shoulders and neck. The cut on her neck was so severe that detectives believed the attacker intended to behead her, describing it in their reports as almost decapitated. The police searched the area around Kay's house and spotted a gray Ford Focus parked in the driveway. They checked the license plates and confirmed that the car belonged to Matthew Terry. One of the windows in Kay's house was open, and its screen had been removed. This window was in a room used by one of Kay's sons, but neither son was home that night. The window faced the Jonathan's house. A right turn from the window led to the neighbor's front yard where Kay was found, while a left turn led to the backyard, which had drops of blood. Detectives quickly secured a search warrant to enter Kay's house. Inside, they noticed that one knife was missing from the kitchen's meat-cutting set, and a mobile phone was still there. The missing knife was a bird's beak, named for its shape and used for peeling vegetables. The bathroom door frame showed significant damage, suggesting that someone had forcefully broken into the master bedroom, where more recent evidence was also found. Signs of a break-in were evident on the nightstand, where another mobile phone was discovered. They then called in a handler with a dog to track a scent. After some time, the dog led a sheriff's deputy to a wooded area where they found a patch of grass soaked with blood. Realizing the perpetrator might be nearby, the authorities decided to bring in another canine unit with a Belgian Malinois, known for its ability to apprehend criminals. The sheriff's deputies took the dog to the blood site and warned that they would release the dog if anyone was hiding, and did not come out. Shortly after, the dog began barking and tried to rush forward. The police soon discovered Matthew hiding in tall grass and bushes. He was only wearing a t-shirt and underwear, and his clothes were covered in blood. Matthew had injuries on his neck and struggled to walk. After a struggle, the police stopped the pursuit, and he was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. May 27, 2022, marked the end of the school year, providing a perfect reason to celebrate. That evening, Kay went to a grill bar with her boyfriend, 47-year-old Matthew Terry. While at the bar, they both got up to use the restroom. Kay returned first and accidentally bumped into her friend Kelly Andrews. Overjoyed to see each other unexpectedly, Kay started dancing happily. As Kay danced, a man neither she nor Kelly knew walked by and made a joke about their celebration. This interaction lasted about 4 seconds and occurred just as Matthew was coming out of the restroom. Matthew assumed that Kay was dancing with another man. At the bar, he confronted Kay, angrily accusing her of dancing with a stranger. Kelly and other regular customers overheard their argument. After that, Matthew and Kay left the bar and headed home. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the drive would take over an hour, during which Matthew continued to argue about the dancing. Frustrated, Kay called Kelly and asked her to clarify that she had not danced with the stranger. Kelly then told Matthew to stop being unreasonable. After the phone call, Kay texted her friend to say she was okay. About 30 minutes later, Kay was found in Jonathan's yard, covered in blood. Investigators believe that Matthew was trying to kill Kay. In a drunken rage, he reportedly stabbed her multiple times and attempted to cut her throat. Kay managed to escape through a window and ran into her neighbor's yard. It's important to note that Kay was not Matthew's first victim. He had a history of violence against women. Matthew had been in a relationship with Michelle Rogers. They met in 2015 through a mobile app while both living in Michigan, where Michelle was with her 5-year-old son. After a brief acquaintance and several months of dating, Michelle decided she wanted to end the relationship until she found out she was pregnant. For the sake of the child, she thought it was best to reconcile with Matthew, and after some time, they began living together. However, Michelle quickly became evident that Matthew was a violent person, and his behavior worsened when he was drunk. One time, he threw a cast iron skillet at Michelle while she was holding their young son. On another occasion, Matthew picked up her cat and threw it against the wall. At night, when he was angry and drunk, Matthew would show up at their apartment and knock on her door, claiming he knew she was sleeping with another man and demanding to be let in. Once, he told one of his colleagues that he wanted to beat Michelle up. The colleague took Matthew's speech as a way for him to vent and didn't think much of it. Several months later, on March 17, 2017, it became evident how serious Matthew's threats were. That day, he went bar hopping with a few friends. By around 6 p.m., Michelle decided to go find Matthew, who was at a nearby bar. When she found him, he was noticeably drunk, slurring his speech and stumbling. Frustrated that he had gotten so intoxicated, Michelle left him at the bar and went home by herself. Around 8 p.m., Matthew knocked on the back door and she let him in. He was very drunk, unable to stand or walk properly, and appeared upset, bordering on angry. After letting him in, Michelle returned to the couch where she had been sitting before. Meanwhile, Matthew went to the kitchen and seemed to be preparing a sandwich. From the couch, Michelle could easily see him as the kitchen and living room were quite open. Michelle was sitting on the couch watching TV when Matthew suddenly appeared from behind and approached her quickly and aggressively. Startled, she asked, "What are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?" Without responding, Matthew began to push her toward the front. In that moment, they both fell to the floor. While they were on the floor, Matthew tried to restrain Michelle and continued to hit her. As they struggled, Michelle attempted to break free and in a moment of desperation, screamed that she loved him and asked why he was doing this. Matthew responded coldly, saying, "You don't need to say anything to me. I am just going to kill you. I'm going to beat it out of you." Michelle continued to fight back and managed to get to her feet. However, Matthew struck her in the face multiple times with great force, knocking her down to the floor again. Despite her efforts to rise, Matthew jumped on her, using his full weight to keep her down. Her hand slipped on the blood-slicked floor, and it seemed she had a broken nose. Matthew then grabbed Michelle by the head and slammed it against the floor. Each time he did this, she felt darkness closing in around her, fearing he would knock her out. Michelle was in a state of confusion, thinking, "Is this really happening?" Her head was spinning, and she could hear shuffling noises coming from the kitchen. Suddenly, she felt Matthew approach from behind and stab her in the neck with a knife. Summoning her last bit of strength, Michelle managed to break free for a moment and noticed a door leading to the garage behind her. So Michelle was able to run to it and press the opener with her left hand to try to open the door and escape. The garage door began to open, but it was moving slowly, and she knew she couldn't crawl under it before Matthew reached her again. As she waited for the door to open wide enough, Matthew lunged at her once more, trying to stop her from leaving. They both fell to the ground, and by that time, the garage door had lifted enough for them to roll out onto the driveway. They rolled a bit on the driveway, revealing that Michelle was lying beneath Matthew. He was furious and had both hands on her head, striking it repeatedly against the cement. He still had the knife and stabbed her 3 times in the right shoulder. Throughout this, Michelle screamed for help. At one point, she heard voices from across the street saying, "Leave her alone." But later she couldn't tell who was speaking or what they were discussing. When Matthew lowered the knife, Michelle grabbed the blade and pulled it toward herself. At that moment, Matthew relaxed his grip, causing the knife to fall to Michelle's neck side. She hoped that without the knife, he would stop fighting, but he continued to struggle to get it back and kept hitting her head against the road. Matthew started biting Michelle, targeting her shoulder and then her left cheek twice in an attempt to make her release the knife. During the struggle, Michelle screamed for help, pleading with him to stop. Eventually, a neighbor called 911. When Matthew heard the sirens approaching, he released Michelle and ran back into the house. Michelle got up and seized the knife to prevent him from taking it back. Blinded by blood filling her contact lenses, she hurried across the street, following the directions of neighbors who were guiding her with their voices. As soon as Michelle crossed the street, she collapsed in her neighbor's yard. The police discovered Michelle lying in the yard after she had been attacked, suffering from bites, bruises, and multiple stab wounds. Fortunately, she survived but spent 5 challenging days in intensive care before she began to recover. Matthew faced attempted murder charges for his violent actions against Michelle. After his arrest, he reached out to an old friend, Kay Baker, to testify in his defense. Kay, who had dated Matthew nearly 20 years prior, eagerly agreed to support him in court. She informed the jurors that Matthew was honest and could be completely trusted. Michelle desperately tried to make Kay see the monster that Matthew actually was. During the trial, Michelle sent Kay photos of her stab wounds and wrote, "Please don't let this happen to you." But Kay saw in Matthew the man she had known back in those days 20 years ago when they were dating. She wasn't alone in her defense of him. Many of Matthew's friends and family were present in the courtroom, supporting him and shaking their heads in disbelief as they listened to Michelle's testimony. Matthew's lawyer managed to persuade the jurors that Matthew's attack on Michelle was an act of self-defense. The lawyer argued that, as a former Marine, Matthew was using his training to defuse a fight that Michelle had started. Ultimately, Matthew was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in prison for assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. In a letter to the Michigan Parole Board, Michelle expressed her fear for herself, her family, and potential future victims, stating, "If he gets out, I am afraid for myself and my family as well as for the next victim. Society is in danger." Unfortunately, her concerns were ignored, and he served only 3 years before being released for good behavior, having also completed psychotherapy. During his time in prison, Matthew maintained contact with Kay, and after his release, he moved to Florida to start a new life with her. Back to the Kay murder case, Matthew claimed he was not guilty of Kay's murder. However, prosecutors believe that he killed her in a fit of jealousy, because he thought she was dancing with another man while they were at a bar. After Kay's murder, an investigator who was part of the team investigating the crime scene following Matthew's attack on Michelle told the press that Matthew Terry was a self-absorbed, manipulative murderer. The trial began in November 2022. Prosecutors worked tirelessly to convince the jurors that Matthew was responsible for Kay Baker's death and sought the death penalty for him. They also believed that Matthew attempted to take his own life after killing Kay. Matthew's lawyers tried to convince the jurors that he and Kay were attacked by an assailant whom Matthew could not identify, and that this perpetrator escaped through a window. The lawyers also argued that the police gave up the chase too quickly because they immediately assumed Matthew was the murderer, thus allowing the real killer to escape. Since the murder weapon was never found, Matthew's lawyers attempted to minimize the importance of the missing kitchen knife by arguing that it could not have caused the injuries to Kay. Matthew's lawyers also worked hard to keep Michelle's case out of the current trial, aware that it could negatively impact the jury's perception of him due to his past violence. However, they were not successful. Michelle was called to testify, and she described the attack she experienced in 2017, which likely influenced the jury's decision. In just 1 hour, the jury reached a unanimous decision, finding Matthew Terry guilty of first-degree murder. Instead of a death sentence, he was given a life sentence. In his final statement, the judge could not hide his emotions, saying, "Given what I've heard, I believe you should have been imprisoned in Michigan. If that had happened, Miss Baker might still be alive. Now, however, you are in Florida, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison. I find you guilty and sentence you to life imprisonment with mandatory statutory fees." The Matthew Terry case is not only a personal tragedy, but it also raises questions about how abusers are treated. Many believe that if the Michigan justice system had taken a more serious look at Matthew's past violent behavior, Kay Baker might not have suffered this fate. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Kathy grew up in a peaceful and happy family. During her childhood, she was very close to her older sister. When she was a teenager, Kathy met Mike Odom, whom she would later marry and start a family. After the wedding, the two settled in a quiet suburb outside of Houston, and soon after, they had a daughter and a son. After the birth of their second child, Kathy stayed home and took care of the children. Meanwhile, Mike worked at her father's small sign factory. Thanks to the financial support of Kathy's parents, the family was able to provide for their children. Therefore, Kathy was able to take care of the children without having to worry about working extra. On March 3, 1987, Kathy stayed home to take care of the children as usual. Mike went to work and then met up with friends at a bar after work. He called Kathy from a pay phone, but she didn't answer. This worried Mike because Kathy rarely left the house. He called several times but got no response. Worried about his wife, Mike called their neighbor, Tim Robinson, and asked him to check on her. Tim went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked through the living room window and saw that the television was still on. So he knocked again but got no response. At this point, he began to worry that something serious might have happened to Kathy. Instead of going home to call Mike or the police, he decided to drive around town looking for police patrols. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted a police car and explained the situation. He asked them to check on Kathy to see if she was okay. When the police arrived at the house, they also got no response to their knocking. They decided to try the door and found it unlocked. Once inside, the police found Kathy's older daughter lying unconscious on the sofa, clearly traumatized but still alive. The police quickly called an ambulance and continued to check other rooms in the house. In the bedroom, they found the younger child lying in her crib, safe and sound. But when they entered another room, they discovered a horrific scene. Kathy was lying on the floor, covered in blood and naked. The police immediately determined that she was dead. Her arms were also tied with a light cord. Paramedics took Kathy's daughter to the hospital and began investigating the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived at the house, but the police did not reveal any specific details. Instead, they asked him to go to the hospital to care for his granddaughter when she woke up. While waiting at the hospital, he learned of his daughter's death from a news report on TV. When Mike arrived at the house, the police quickly discovered something strange. He arrived late and had blood-like stains on his shirt. The police asked him to hand over his clothes and answer questions. During this time, the police discovered some interesting signs. They found several blood stains in the bathroom, indicating that the attacker had tried to hide the evidence after the crime. This suggested that the attacker had been in the house for some time to clean up. Forensic experts also discovered some important clues. There were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors except the front door were locked. This suggested that Kathy had invited the attacker into the house or that the attacker had a key. Police speculated that the attacker may have threatened to harm Kathy's children if she screamed or resisted. Therefore, Kathy may have complied with the attacker's demands, hoping to be spared, but was ultimately murdered. As doctors worked to save Kathy's daughter, they discovered that she had been brutally beaten, most likely with her bare hands. She spent several hours in critical condition at the hospital, and her chances of survival were still very low. After examining Kathy's body, medical experts determined that she had suffered severe injuries with 16 stab wounds, most of which were concentrated in the abdomen. They also discovered that she had been sexually assaulted and collected biological samples of the offender from the scene. However, at that time, DNA analysis methods were not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, experts were unable to extract DNA profiles from biological samples. They were only able to determine the killer's blood type, so the sample was sent to the lab for further analysis. The police had noticed suspicious stains on his shirt early in the investigation and had kept the clothes for examination. His behavior that evening was very suspicious. He had gone out with friends after work, but instead of going home when he couldn't reach his wife, he asked a neighbor to check on him. The police had seen similar cases before, where a husband killed his wife and created an alibi by going out with friends. He would then ask someone else to check on his wife to avoid being the first to discover the body and throwing the police off the trail. The police expanded their investigation to see if Mike might have planned the murder before meeting his friends. They also discovered that Mike had a criminal record. After graduating from high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison but only served 2 years before being paroled. He later married Kathy. Although Mike had a criminal record, the police needed more evidence to charge him. The police also began investigating Mike's neighbor, Tim, because of signs of suspicion. Tim drove around town looking for patrol officers instead of calling the police. The police checked Tim's car and found suspicious blood-like stains on the carpet. They sent these samples to the lab for analysis. Now investigators wondered if Mike and Tim might have worked together to commit the crime. After completing the report, the medical examiner came to an important conclusion. Kathy's time of death was around 1 p.m. before she was discovered around 6 p.m. The police expanded their investigation to determine the suspect's whereabouts around that time and to find out what they did after the murder. Mike and Tim both claimed to be at work at the time. So the police set out to see if their statements were accurate. 2 days after the murder, they received a call from the hospital saying Kathy's daughter had woken up. The police went to see her in the hope that she would provide important information about what had happened. However, they encountered a major obstacle. The 4-year-old girl's memory was almost completely erased. She only remembered a light-haired man entering the house, while Mike and Tim had dark hair. But the police did not rule them out as suspects. They believed that the severe trauma could have made her memory inaccurate. The police received a call from the lab with surprising information. Experts examined the evidence and found that the stain on Tim's car carpet was motor oil, and the stain on Mike's shirt was just paint, not evidence of a crime. In addition, many of Mike and Tim's co-workers also confirmed that they had been at work all day and did not leave until the evening. Thus, they had no opportunity to go to Kathy's house and commit the crime. The police requested a lie detector test and the results showed that neither of them were lying. There was no conclusive evidence. The police had to review the entire case and investigate other suspects who might be familiar to Kathy's family, because the attacker could have easily entered Kathy's house. During the investigation, they had conversations with Kathy's relatives and friends to find out who they thought might have committed the crime. Many of them immediately named the same person, Greg. Greg was Kathy's brother-in-law, and her loved ones revealed that she often complained about his behavior. Specifically, according to Kathy, Greg openly flirted with her and repeatedly tried to convince her to have sex with him. Kathy also said that Greg often made inappropriate comments about her appearance, especially about her abdomen. And according to the evidence collected, we know that most of the injuries were on Kathy's abdomen. The police also knew that Greg had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal record. Therefore, the police began to suspect him and soon found some important clues. They found Greg's fingerprints matched one in Kathy's house, as well as a hair that matched his. However, it should be noted that Greg often visited Kathy's family, so it is possible that the fingerprints and hair were in the house before the murder occurred. Kathy's parents also believed that he was the one who killed their daughter. Kathy's mother specifically remembered one time when Greg visited Kathy's daughter at the hospital. When she saw Greg, she had a clear look of fear on her face. These observations suggested that she was afraid of him. However, when asked, she could not remember what happened on the day of the murder. After hearing all this information, the police summoned Greg for questioning. However, he denied any involvement in the murder and said that he was with a friend at the time. During the questioning, Greg asked to go to the parking lot because he was afraid of being fined for expired parking. However, he did not return to the police station. Greg's wife, Kathy's sister, said that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m. This meant that Greg had a 4-hour window around the time of the murder, enough time for him to commit the crime. However, the police still did not find enough evidence to prove Greg's involvement in the murder. In a last-ditch effort to find more clues, the police decided to analyze a semen sample taken from Kathy's body. However, at that time, the technology only allowed for the blood type of the owner of the semen sample to be determined. In addition, the analysis of the samples collected from the case was too small to be tested. However, the police still decided to perform the test. The results showed that the blood type of the owner of the semen sample matched Greg's blood type, but this was not enough to conclude that he was guilty. As a result, the police were unable to arrest him. They continued to search for more evidence, but were unable to prove that Greg was involved in the case. Kathy's family believed that Greg was the killer. Kathy's sister Shelley still did not believe that her husband was involved in the case and continued to live with him. In the years that followed, the police continued to revisit the case, hoping to find any new clues. In 1998, 11 years after Kathy was murdered, they requested a DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, experts were only able to extract a partial DNA profile, which, when compared to Greg's DNA, showed that Greg was among the 2% of the population who could match the profile. He could not be arrested based on this result. The police again called Greg in for questioning, telling him that the semen from Kathy's body matched his DNA. Greg then changed his original statement, saying that Kathy had been romantically involved with him and that he had actually visited her on the day of the murder, but Greg insisted that she was still alive when he left. The police were suspicious of Greg's sudden change in story because suspects often change their stories when they hear about DNA evidence. In addition, Kathy had complained about Greg's flirtations, feeling uncomfortable around him. So it was unlikely that she would have had a secret relationship with him. But the police knew that they could not convict without a perfect DNA match. The local police reviewed the case and confirmed that a guilty verdict was almost impossible, and the case was put on hold again for many years. In 2002, the police reopened the case and asked for help from forensic scientist Catherine Long. At the time, Catherine was doing groundbreaking DNA research. She and her colleagues wanted to know if the offender's DNA might still be on Kathy's body after the strangulation, and if they could extract that DNA for analysis. To test this, Catherine and her team conducted a simulation experiment. They followed the steps the perpetrators took by briefly strangling each other, then taking samples from their hands and necks for analysis. The results showed that even in such a short interaction, there were still enough skin cells to extract and analyze DNA. The police began to focus on the available evidence when they were unable to re-examine her body. They decided to thoroughly examine all the items related to the case to see if the perpetrator had come into contact with them. They quickly noticed the string of lights that the killer had used to tie Kathy's hands, which the police gave to Catherine and her colleagues to examine. As they began their work, they noticed that the string had been stored in a paper bag. This was important because the paper bag allowed air to circulate, preventing moisture buildup and protecting the biological samples. Experts used cotton swabs to collect biological samples from the entire length of the rope. They paid special attention to areas on the rope that still had traces of Kathy's blood. After analysis, they discovered 2 DNA profiles. The first profile, belonging to the victim Kathy, the second profile completely matched Greg's DNA sample. The police finally had evidence that Greg was the one who tied Kathy's hands, and that he was the killer. 15 years after Kathy's death, the perpetrator was finally arrested. During questioning, Greg did not confess, insisting that he had a romantic relationship with Kathy. The police did not believe him. While awaiting trial, Greg was detained. A cellmate of Greg's contacted the police and said that Greg had confessed to him. According to the friend, Greg told them the details of the attack and murder. Greg said that one day, he had been using illegal drugs and went to Kathy's house. Once inside, Greg tried to force Kathy to have sex, but she refused and asked him to leave. However, Greg became aggressive and attacked Kathy's daughter, causing many serious injuries. Greg assured Kathy that if she did not comply with his wishes, he would kill her. Kathy had no choice but to agree to protect her children. Greg then tied her up, attacked her, and killed her with many injuries. To cover up the crime, Greg washed the blood off himself in the bathroom and changed into Kathy's husband's clothes before leaving the school. The police forced Greg to face the truth. This time, Greg confessed to killing Kathy. In 2004, he pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, he only served 4 years before dying at the age of 56 of liver cancer. Kathy's husband, Mike, died at the age of 45. For 15 years, Kathy's family, including her parents and children, waited patiently, trusting that the police would find the killer. Although they believed Greg was the killer, they saw him continue to live with their second daughter, but there was nothing they could do. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, affectionately known as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her father, William Gallagher, worked as a newspaper sales manager, while her mother, Jane Gallagher, was a dedicated teacher. From an early age, Susan showed a passion for learning and a strong love of literature, suggesting that she might follow in her mother's footsteps into the field of education. While studying at Grove City College, Susan met a young Air Force recruit named Kenneth Reinert. Although their meeting was simple, it had a profound impact on her life. Susan and Kenneth's relationship deepened as they both pursued higher education. After much effort and determination, Susan graduated from college with a bachelor's degree. She continued her education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University. In 1965, Susan and Kenneth began their new lives after graduating from Grove City College. Because Kenneth was in the military, they had to move around a lot. They started by moving to Sacramento, California, then returned to the Northeast and lived in Rome, New York. The family even lived in Puerto Rico for a while before settling permanently in the Philadelphia area in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhardt, a devoted teacher and loving mother, experienced a turning point when she and Kenneth decided to divorce. The divorce was amicable, without legal disputes. Susan then became an active single mother, focusing on building a home for her two children, Karen and Michael. With her warm and friendly personality, she was well liked by her colleagues and students at Chestnut Walled Elementary School. In addition to her teaching career, Susan was actively involved with Parents Without Partners, especially in the Valley Forge program. After her mother passed away, Susan found strength and support from this organization despite her grief. Despite many challenges, she persevered through her involvement with Parents Without Partners. Susan's story took a mysterious turn. On June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhardt and her two children spent their day together. That morning, her son, Michael, had been with his father, Kenneth. That evening, they had attended a father-son baseball game. However, the game ended early when Susan picked Michael up at 8:30 p.m. That evening, Susan contacted her ex-husband's parents, Florence and John Reinhardt. Despite their divorce, she had maintained a good relationship with them. Susan checked the gas tank and found it was nearly full, enough for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town about an hour's drive north. The purpose of the trip was to attend a single-parent conference and spend the weekend with her children. Susan had signed up to run a workshop there and keep the children involved in activities throughout the weekend. They planned to leave on Saturday morning and return home late Sunday. At around 9 p.m. on Friday night, Karen and Michael were playing outside, picking up hailstones left over from a summer storm. About 30 minutes later, neighbors heard Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon start. Minutes later, the car disappeared. Susan had left the house with her two children, possibly to visit her boyfriend before going to the conference. She was in a long-term relationship with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher. Although they tried to keep it a secret, the relationship was causing tension in Susan's marriage to Kenneth. There were even rumors that Susan and William might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan and her children set off after visiting her boyfriend. They planned to travel to Allentown, about 49 miles north, to spend the night at a motel. However, they never arrived. Susan and her children disappeared without a trace, leaving those who knew and loved them distraught. On June 25, 1979, Susan's Plymouth hatchback was discovered in the parking lot of the Host Inn in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan's lifeless body was found in the back of the car. The details of her agonizing death were gruesome. Her body was naked, beaten, and bound with chains, curled up in the wheel well of the car. Her hands were tied, and she had black eyes. She had been beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains left bruises on her back. More frighteningly, she had been injected with a fatal dose of morphine. The whereabouts of her two children, however, were unknown. They had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Police searched for hours. But no one had seen them, nor had any of Susan's friends or relatives seen them that weekend. So, the police began investigating further. They posted pictures of the Reinhardt family in newspapers for weeks, looking for any clues about the children. The investigation discovered that Susan had named William Bradfield, the man she thought she was going to marry, as the beneficiary of $730,000 in life insurance policies. This raised suspicions that her children might have been murdered so he could receive the money. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was in Cape May, New Jersey, the weekend Susan was murdered and her children went missing. Several teachers were present and confirmed his whereabouts. The police then turned their attention to Upper Merion High School, where Susan worked, as the school was experiencing problems. Principal Jay Smith was embroiled in a scandal. He had served as principal until he was fired the previous year after being arrested at a local shopping center. In his Ford Granada, police discovered loaded handguns, a balaclava, and burglary tools. More disturbingly, a syringe containing morphine was found in the trunk. Jay had been struggling before that. His wife, Stephanie Smith, was diagnosed with malignant cancer and died in August 1979, after several hospitalizations. During this time, Stephanie Smith began keeping a diary, documenting her husband's strange behavior, which became increasingly worse. Jay became involved in intimate groups and changed sexual partners, which Stephanie Smith did not approve of, and this seemed to lead to even more disturbing behavior. In September 1977, Stephanie Huntsberger, the adult daughter of the couple, moved in with her parents along with her husband, Edward Huntsberger. They settled into the Smiths' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, that fall. Stephanie Smith was battling cancer, which caused turmoil in the family and seemed to increase tensions among them. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, were struggling with heroin addiction and had difficulty finding and keeping jobs before deciding to move back in with their families. Moving in with their parents was a desperate attempt to escape drugs. In early 1978, Jay Smith's daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Huntsberger and Edward, mysteriously disappeared. They had moved in with Jay Smith and his wife just a few months earlier. They was last seen in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. When they left, they promised to return soon, but then they disappeared. Their disappearance was first noticed when Edward failed to show up for a meeting with his probation officer later that month. Authorities contacted Jay Smith, the last person known to have had contact with the couple. Jay Smith told people that Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger had run away to California. He said they owed money to some drug dealers in the area and had fled to the West Coast. However, he was unable to provide any further information about the incident. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger lived a nomadic life, so their disappearance went unnoticed for some time. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for burglary. When police searched Jay's home, they found several suspicious items, including weapons, drugs, security uniforms, badges, and pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and office supplies stolen from a nearby school. Jay was suspected of being involved in recent armed robberies. During the burglary trial, Jay's friend William testified that they were on vacation when the robberies occurred. However, the jury did not believe this testimony. Jay had a bad reputation in Upper Merion and was known as the Prince of Darkness. Jay Smith was eventually sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979, for a series of store robberies that took place in the late 1970s. During the investigation, Jay was arrested for burglary. Although Jay was in custody, the police still considered him a prime suspect in Susan's murder and continued to investigate his past. They made a remarkable discovery: Jay's daughter and son-in-law had also disappeared under similar circumstances as Susan and her 2 children. This led the police to suspect that there might be a connection between the 2 disappearances, Susan's death and the disappearance of her children. First, Susan had been killed by a morphine overdose, and a large amount of morphine had been discovered in Jay's home several months earlier. Second, a plastic comb with Jay's identification had been found in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law closely resembled the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that unfolded in this case were shocking and left a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking truth was yet to be revealed. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was found near Harrisburg, investigators discovered a potential motive for the horrific murder that was financial gain. On July 20, 1979, a Philadelphia attorney filed a motion to stay the execution of Susan's will in both Montgomery County and Delaware. The motion was filed on behalf of Kenneth Reinert, Susan's ex-husband, and Patrick Gallagher, her brother. The purpose of this legal action was to give both men an opportunity to review the contents of Susan's will before it was executed. They decided to file in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was near the county line, allowing her to file her will in both places. It was later discovered that just a few weeks before her death, Susan had made several significant changes to her will. She had also purchased several large life insurance policies, naming her current boyfriend, William, as the beneficiary. In the legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24, 1979. William and other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and remained there until the afternoon of Monday, June 25. However, it was unclear exactly where William was during the time of Susan's disappearance, casting doubt on his alibi. The investigation also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her account, totaling approximately $25,000, through multiple transactions due to daily limits. She told the bank staff that she intended to invest the money in high-yield investments managed by William, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan did not expect was that she was just one of many women in William's life. He was secretly dating several other people, including a coworker who taught English, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly 10 years. William had promised Susan that the investments would yield large returns to finance their upcoming wedding and move to England. During the investigation, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. They later discovered that William had sold these fake securities to Susan and then passed them on to her. These securities were mostly related to fictitious and worthless companies, suggesting that William had been deceiving Susan for a long time. This discovery added a new dimension to the case, further clarifying William's financial motives. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil lawsuit. During his first appearance, he refused to answer questions directly and referred questions to his legal counsel. Although William's attorneys denied that he had taken Susan's money, they were willing to negotiate with the state to settle the matter and handle Susan's $1 million will. By June 1980, William had officially testified in court for the first time. He denied most of the allegations related to the case, insisting that his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her relatives. He also denied any plans to marry Susan later that year, contrary to what Susan had shared with her close friends. William made unsubstantiated allegations about Susan's relationship with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, although there was no evidence to support these claims. On the contrary, many of Susan's relatives and friends confirmed her long-term relationship with William. It should be noted that Jay Smith was in prison during the trial. William did not explain why Susan chose him as the heir to her $1 million-plus estate. Instead, he described Susan as unreliable and troubled. William also blamed Susan for her problems and claimed that he was only helping to solve her problems, especially in the civil lawsuit over the missing $25,000. In June 1980, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit. They wanted to recover the entire $450,000 insurance policy that Susan had received a few weeks before her death. The intention was to put the money in a trust fund to conduct their own investigation. The case was complicated and full of unexpected events. On February 20, 1981, William was arrested by the police on 3 charges: 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy. He was accused of keeping $25,000 that Susan had given him to invest. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but his criminal trial was scheduled to begin the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the civil case was closed. It was decided that $36,000 from Susan's estate would be used to further investigate the children's clothing and settle a dispute over the remainder of her will. This prevented William from receiving any money on August 3, 1981. William's criminal trial lasted 5 days and ended with a guilty verdict on the theft charge. Delaware County District Attorney Edward Weiss then asked that William's bail be increased from $25,000 to $75,000. The reason was that they believed this sentence increased the risk of William fleeing, especially since there was a possibility that he would be charged with murder. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, William was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police on several felony charges, including 3 counts of murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, and obstruction of justice. The jury concluded that William knew about the plan to kill Susan and her children and was involved in the crimes. Although Jay Smith was believed to be involved, he was not charged at the time. Part of the indictment was based on the testimony of Proctor Noel, a fellow inmate, who stated that during a game of chess, William confessed to his involvement in the murders. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 was a major step in the investigation of the case. Although there was no physical evidence linking William to Susan Reinert's death or the disappearance of her children, prosecutors were confident in the case. William's previous burglary convictions and his connection to the suspected body dumping led to more serious charges in the 1980s. Jay Smith, who was serving time for other crimes, was forced to testify before a grand jury despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. William Bradfield was also called to testify in 1984, but details of his testimony have not been released. The hearing was reportedly related to the disappearances of Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples to compare with old documents that might be related to the plan to kill Susan Reinert. This investigation led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinert's body was found. Jay was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and held in custody while awaiting trial. In 1984, Joseph Wambaugh, a well-known crime author, published a book about the case. The book supported the theory that Jay was the killer. A television movie based on the book was later produced, bringing the case to national attention. Jay maintained his innocence throughout his imprisonment. He appealed and accused William Bradfield of framing him. In 1989, the court reviewed the case and found problems with the indictment, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a more thorough investigation. In 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning the murder conviction and finding the prosecution guilty. For the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing Jay to live out his life in freedom. William Bradfield continued to evade liability and refused to pay the $25,000 owed to Susan Reinert's estate. The case dragged on until 1996. Jay sued the state and Joseph Wambaugh for defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, after more than 10 years in prison, was found unconscious in his cell and died of cardiac arrest. Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinert, died in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. Jay Smith, who was exonerated in 1992, wrote a book about his case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009. However, the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, remains unsolved to this day. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lynette Vonda Pontius. Lynette Pontius was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with two brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette is very active, sociable and cheerful, so she is always popular in every group of friends. She very also attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby. He disappeared and ignored all to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette's. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always keeps a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believe that he will be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time, he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just two young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite her, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin has proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially published her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. At first, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit his on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not a random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which a weapon man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Pontius. She was the only person with a motive against he. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly begins to control things and she wants more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutal when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered she. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at the house Martin. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin may owe large sums of money from criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his meet with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him some time before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or full of mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method, as long as Martin dies, so that she can gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted he was driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, said that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believes Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time, but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette the crime was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died, she just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched with what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with him. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, she portraying herself as a victim. This thing aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed, she only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself, because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for Women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon. But no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hopes she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tasha Morton. Dwayne Barentine was a single father raising his 6-year-old son. Nothing is known about the child's mother. In June 2007, Dwayne and his son lived in the suburbs of Marianna, a small, sunny town in Florida, USA. Although Dwayne worked full-time to provide for his son, he made sure to spend as much time as possible with him on weekends. His parents helped care for the boy, and he also took his son to kindergarten, but the child missed having a mother's care, which concerned Dwayne. He often heard his son pray before bed, wishing for a mother. Dwayne decides to search for a suitable woman who can become his wife and a loving mother to his son. When Dwayne was picking up his son from kindergarten one day, a new teacher handed him a note with her phone number. Curiously, he asked whose number it was, and the woman said it was hers. Dwayne realized she was flirting with him. Attracted by the beautiful blonde, he took the chance and called her. During the conversation, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Tasha was also a single mother, newly moved to the city with her 6-year-old daughter, Lexi. At the time, Tasha was 31 years old and worked as a kindergarten teacher. When Dwayne and Tasha started dating, Tasha's daughter and Dwayne's son were the same age and quickly became friends. Lexi even called Dwayne Dad, which he was touched by. Tasha's daughter was a child from her previous marriage, a subject she did not want to discuss. Her private nature did not affect the couple in the early stages of their relationship. Within weeks, Lexi started calling Dwayne Daddy, and he really loved Lexi. Soon after, they moved in together, in Dwayne's house. He was delighted with his new partner. She was a beautiful and charming woman who showed her love through small, thoughtful gestures. It seemed like they had found each other and had a happy future ahead of them. Dwayne told his old friends and relatives that he loved her very much. To him, Tasha seemed perfect. However, not everyone was happy with their relationship. Dwayne's mother criticized him for rushing into a relationship and moving in together so quickly. She thought they should get to know each other better. But Dwayne ignored his mother's advice. Tasha says she doesn't want to discuss her past because of past hurts. Dwayne chose not to press her for more details to avoid upsetting her. Over time, as more stories about Tasha's past came to light, Dwayne noticed more and more inconsistencies. Some of the stories seemed particularly strange. Tasha claimed that her grandfather was a federal judge who died in a battery explosion and that she was supposed to inherit a large sum of money. However, there was no inheritance, and attempts to verify her stories were unsuccessful, even though such a significant event should have been easy to confirm. As they continued to live together, Dwayne noticed that Tasha often made up stories about her living. This worried him, so he decided to investigate further to learn more about her past. While searching the internet, he discovers that Tasha's first husband was a man named Mitch Kemp, but he was not her only husband. Dwayne uncovered that by age 31, she had been married 5 times, which Dwayne found unusual. And Mitch is Lexi's father. After much persuasion, Tasha finally confides in Dwayne, admitting that her marriage to Mitch was a mistake. She sees him as a friend and has no romantic feelings for him. Despite Dwayne's efforts, he is unable to find Mitch Kemp to gather more information about Tasha. Mitch seems to have disappeared. Tasha mentions that she has not heard from Mitch in years and has not attempted to contact him, which Dwayne finds strange. Dwayne eventually contacted Jones, one of Tasha's ex-husbands. He agreed to meet and talk. Dwayne shared that Tasha was hesitant to share her past with him, so she often made up stories about her life. Jones then revealed something to Dwayne that shocked him. Jones said that Tasha, while drunk, confessed that she was involved in the murder of one of her ex-husbands. According to Jones, Tasha had had a few drinks that night, which made her more talkative. According to Tasha, Mitch raped her daughter. She could not forgive him for this act. At the time, Tasha was married to another man named Greg Morton. She told him about the incident and Greg became extremely angry. Instead of reporting Mitch to the police, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Together, they planned to kill Mitch. Tasha lures Mitch to her new home and Greg waits for Mitch there, shooting him multiple times in the heart. Jones did not believe his wife's story because it seemed like she was making it up. Because she told it while she was drunk, which is why he did not go to the police. However, Dwayne became suspicious because he could not find any contact information for Mitch, Lexi's biological father, whom she had married before Greg. He suspected that Mitch might be dead. This caused Dwayne to reconsider the facts he had heard and began searching for information. However, he could not find any evidence linking Tasha to the murder. So he continued living with Tasha. Despite his concerns, he decided to ignore the situation to ensure his son had a loving mother. She was very loving and caring towards him, which made him doubt Jones' story, so he stopped looking for more information. The couple planned their wedding. After a few months, Dwayne discovered that Tasha was cheating on him. They had an argument, and he kicked her out of the house. Feeling hurt, Dwayne decided to continue his investigation into her past. He went to her MySpace page, where he found a number of unread messages. People were asking if the account belonged to Mitch's ex-wife and wanted to know where she was. According to Mitch's relatives, Mitch had been missing for about 4 years and they had been looking for him the entire time. These messages worried Dwayne, piqued his interest in the story, and motivated him to continue his investigation. Dwayne reviewed all the information he had gathered. He noticed that Lexi's birth certificate bore the last name Kemp. Tasha had married Mitch shortly before she married Greg. One of Tasha's other ex-husbands, Jones, revealed that Tasha and Greg were involved in a conspiracy and that Mitch's murder was a disturbing fact. However, Dwayne could not take any further action as the clues to uncover the truth had run out. Dwayne went to the Marianne Police Department and told the sheriff his story. The police officers listened carefully and were interested in the part involving Mitch Kemp. They started an investigation and asked Dwayne to keep it secret to avoid alarming Tasha. The police believed they were dealing with a murder case and even had suspects. This situation was unprecedented for the town's police, as it was the first time a civilian had independently used social networks to uncover clues to solve an old crime. The police were particularly impressed by Dwayne's accuracy in determining the dates and times of events. He showed a natural talent for investigation. However, the police still have to continue investigating on their own, using every clue to investigate the case. Police initially spoke with Jones, who told Dwayne the same story about Tasha's plot. The conversation was recorded. Police also contacted Mitch Kemp's relatives, who lived thousands of miles away in Boone County, Missouri. From his relatives, police were able to glean important information about the circumstances and timing of Mitch's disappearance. Mitch's family has always suspected Tasha of being involved in his disappearance. At this point, Tasha was 26 years old, and Mitch was almost 11 years her senior. Some people began to doubt her sincerity because she was much younger and very attractive. At first, their relationship seemed perfect, but soon Tasha became controlling and ignored his wishes and those of his family. Mitch, normally gentle and kind, put up with her behavior and became an easy target for manipulation. Despite this, their relationship continued. In 2002, the couple had a daughter and later got married. Unfortunately, their marriage was not long-lasting or happy. They faced financial problems and their relationship was very complicated. This unstable situation could not last. After 8 months, the marriage ended. Tasha left with her daughter. Not wanting to be a single mother, she met Greg Morton before her divorce was finalized. They started dating and she moved in with him along. They were married just 6 months after meeting. Mitch Kemp was very upset because he still loved Tasha and wanted to reconcile with her. However, Tasha refused to return to him, prompting Mitch to pursue joint custody of their daughter by filing a lawsuit. When he informed Tasha, she became very angry, especially after Mitch threatened to seek full custody. In August 2004, Mitch shared this conversation with his brother, also revealing that during their last meeting, Tasha had hit and spat at him. Just 2 weeks later, Mitch vanished without a trace. His brother tried to reach out to Tasha, suspecting she might know Mitch's whereabouts given their serious conflict over divorce and custody. Tasha denied any knowledge of Mitch's location and subsequently ignored all communication from his family. Meanwhile, she continued to pay her bills using funds from Mitch's bank account. Mitch's family was unable to find him, so they contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the search was unsuccessful and Mitch disappeared without a trace. The investigation reached a dead end and the case was archived without any active involvement. The police found no evidence or confirmation that Tasha and Greg were involved in Mitch's disappearance or murder. About 4 years later, in 2008, the police finally got Dwayne's story. The police believed Mitch was no longer alive. But they had no body, no murder weapon, and no crime scene. Ideally, they need a confession and the police need to talk to Tasha. So the police began looking for Tasha. When the police found her, they invited her to the station for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Tasha expressed her desire to cooperate with the police. She was unaware that the police already knew about the murder story she had told Jones. She said she was not surprised by Mitch's disappearance, given his bad character, and suggested that someone might have sought revenge against him. When asked about her second husband, she mentioned that she had divorced Greg a long time ago and had little contact with him, knowing nothing about his current situation. Tasha also denied any involvement in Mitch's disappearance. However, the police believed they were on the right track and continued to pressure her to confess. Tasha initially described Greg as a normal, unremarkable person. However, as the police asked more questions, a darker side to Greg's personality emerged. He seemed intimidating, as Tasha began to describe him as aggressive and short-tempered. The police eventually convinced Tasha to confess that Greg had killed Mitch. According to her narrative, one day when she was not home, Mitch came over to discuss custody of their daughter. A heated argument broke out between Mitch and Greg, which escalated into a fight. During the fight, Greg pulled out a gun and shot Mitch several times in the chest. This incident occurred in August 2004. Tasha believes that there may have been hostility between Greg and Mitch, as Greg was extremely jealous and suspected her of having an affair with Mitch. Tasha had anticipated this possibility but hoped it would not come to pass. Fortunately, her daughter was not home at the time of the murder. She assured the police that she was not involved, did not encourage Greg to commit the murder, and did not turn him against Mitch, her ex-husband. She claimed that she only learned about the incident when Greg confessed to her, detailing how he shot Mitch. Tasha also provided information about where to find Mitch's body. Mitch's body was believed to be at the old farm, although she did not know the exact location. The farm was a large area, about 15 hectares, and had been sold after the murder. The old house had been demolished, and a new house had been built elsewhere, making it impossible to recreate the crime scene, which greatly hindered the search for the body. Despite Tasha's claims of innocence, the police began to suspect her, especially because of Jones's account of her presence at the crime scene and she had lured Mitch to meet the killer. This story warranted a thorough investigation, but could not proceed without the body being found. Tasha cooperated fully with the police. She agreed to travel with them from Florida to Missouri to search for Mitch's body on a farm. When she arrived, she was confused because the area had changed dramatically. Everything had been rebuilt and a new family was living there. As they walked around, Tasha focused on the location of the old house. Even though the buildings were destroyed, she confidently pointed out the location. However, the police found nothing there with their equipment, leading them to suspect that she might be lying. The police believed that Tasha should have known exactly where Mitch's body was. The search for the body on the farm continued. Despite the efforts of the searchers, they were still unable to find anything. After 5 weeks of painstaking and fruitless work, Tasha was questioned again, with the police applying even more pressure. This was to be expected, as they had excavated a large area without finding a single clue. At that moment, Tasha suddenly remembered a large hole being dug on the farm. Greg had buried the body there shortly after he told her about the murder. Tasha was able to point out the location on a map. The police focused their efforts on this spot, and within half an hour of digging, the police found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The body was quickly taken for forensic analysis, which confirmed that the remains belonged to Mitch Kemp, who had been reported missing. Forensic experts determined that he was murdered, finding 6 bullets in his chest that caused instant death. Mitch was shot at point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. 3 weeks after his body was discovered, police arrested Greg Morton in St. Louis and charged him with first-degree murder. Police hoped he would denounce his ex-wife, Tasha, whom they suspected was also involved in the crime. However, Greg remained silent. Police believed that keeping him in custody would persuade him to talk, but this strategy failed. Even after spending months in jail, Greg still did not testify against Tasha. Despite this, police chose to arrest Tasha out of concern she might flee. Although the investigation lacked solid evidence, relying only on a witness statement, she was charged with first-degree murder. Tasha was arrested in the city. She later gave a different account of Mitch's death. She explained that she had indeed taken Mitch to the farm but claimed that she had no intention of leading him into a trap, as she did not know. Tasha intended to give Mitch pictures of their daughter at kindergarten and wanted to talk to him. However, Greg found out about them together. He approached with a gun and pointed it at Mitch. Before she could react, Greg shot Mitch 6 times in the chest. She believed Greg acted out of jealousy. After the shooting stopped, Greg pinned her against the wall, blaming her for provoking him and causing Mitch's death. She wanted to call the police, but it was too late to help Mitch. Greg forced her to be quiet and then disposed of the body by burying it in a large hole. Surprisingly, after these violent events, Tasha and Greg lived together for about a year and a half before they divorced. The police were baffled. How could she continue living with the man who killed the father of her child? However, Tasha explained that she feared ending the relationship would put her in danger. 3 weeks after Tasha was arrested, Greg finally spoke up and shared his account of the tragic events with the police. Greg admitted to shooting Mitch but claimed he was manipulated by his ex-wife. He said Tasha had told him about the rape and was seeking revenge. Greg insists that if it weren't for her urging, he wouldn't have hurt Mitch. Despite Greg's claims, Tasha maintained her innocence. In June 2010, nearly 6 years after Mitch's disappearance, Tasha Morton went to trial. Tasha's lawyers argued that she was a victim, trapped in an abusive relationship with violent Greg, who they said killed Mitch and threatened her into silence. Greg's defense argued that Tasha was responsible for the murder. They claimed that she had convinced Greg, her devoted second husband, to kill Mitch, with whom she was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha maintained to the end that she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the prosecution was certain that her manipulations caused the tragic event. The main evidence was the confession of Greg, the killer, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence for second-degree murder. The court ultimately sentenced Greg Morton to 19 years in prison. Tasha's defense claimed that Greg had fabricated the story to get a reduced sentence. They argued that Greg had acted out of jealousy, leading him to shoot the innocent victim, Mitch. During the trial, a neighbor who lived near the couple at the time of the incident testified. He described Greg as domineering, asserting complete control over his wife and demanding that she follow his orders without question. It was clear that Tasha feared Greg and was unable to manipulate him. Then, Tasha's ex-husband, Jones, became a key witness. He recounted a story that Tasha had shared while drunk during their marriage, claiming that she had invited Mitch to the farm with the intention of killing him. However, Tasha denied that this conversation ever happened, claiming that Jones learned the story from Greg, not her. She believes Jones is protecting Greg. Besides listening to the testimony, the jury had to watch over 8 hours of interrogation footage. Tasha's lawyer believed she would be acquitted. The jury recognized that she had cooperated with the investigation from the start, helped in the search, and without her, Mitch's body might never have been found. Her defense argued that if Tasha were involved in her ex-husband's death, she wouldn't have led police to this clue. However, Tasha may have had a motive, as Mitch was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha claimed that Mitch saw Lexi regularly, and they never fought over custody. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned to the courtroom and found Tasha Morton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury explained their decision by noting that Tasha's story had changed several times, while Greg's story remained consistent. They concluded that Tasha had lied and manipulated Greg into killing Mitch. The verdict came as a complete shock to Tasha. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tasha attempted to appeal her sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Mitch's family celebrated the verdict, feeling that justice had finally been served. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jordan Graham. Montana is the largest landlocked state in the United States, known for its stunning views of the Rocky Mountains and beautiful lakes. A major attraction in Montana is Glacier Park, a vibrant tourist destination, particularly during summer. The park features approximately 700 hiking trails for visitors to explore. Cody Johnson was born in San Jose, California. After his parents divorced, his mother, Sherry, raised him on her own. They always share a close. Eventually, Sherry decided to leave California and move to Montana with Cody. He is a kind, cheerful, and humorous person. He enjoys spending time outdoors, participating in activities like fishing and hiking, but his greatest passion is cars. He collected, repaired, and raced them with friends. After graduating, Cody found a job assembling custom cars, which he naturally enjoyed. His boss was his close friend Cameron, and Cody's career was thriving. However, he dreamed of settling down, meeting someone, and starting a family to fully establish himself in Montana. Cody's bachelor life was about to change. In 2011, he met and started dating Jordan Graham, a 21 years old. She was shy and reserved, only opening up when she felt comfortable. Jordan shared Cody's love for nature and travel. They spent a lot of time hiking together in beautiful Montana locations, especially enjoying visits to Glacier Park. Jordan loved children and often babysat for her friends, expressing her dream of having her own child. She came from a religious family with strict rules, including a ban on sex before marriage. Cody told friends that he really liked Jordan, and he began attending church with her friends and family. He shared that their relationship was growing stronger, and he was so in love that he told his mother he had found the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. In December 2012, Cody announced his engagement to Jordan on social media. Friends were thrilled about the engagement. 6 months later, on June 29, 2013, Cody and Jordan got married in an outdoor ceremony. They appeared to be the happiest and most perfect couple. They received many congratulatory speeches, making the event truly wonderful for them. After the long and significant day, they moved into their first home. Instead of going on a honeymoon, they decided to spend their free time working on the house. Cody took a week off from work and was expected to return on July 8, 2013. On Sunday, July 7th, Cody had plans to go kayaking with his father-in-law, Stephen. However, he later contacted Stephen to cancel, mentioning that Jordan had a surprise for him. He and Jordan attended an afternoon church service and then went for a walk by the lake. After the walk, Cody did not return to work, which was unusual for him. His boss, Cameron, became worried and decided to visit his home. Finding no one there and no signs of a break-in, Cameron checked the garage for Cody's car and found his phone, which he usually kept with him. Cameron then reported Cody missing to the police. The detectives first needed a statement from Cody's wife, Jordan. She explained that on their way back from Dairy Queen, Cody received a call and talked for about 30 minutes. She didn't know who called, but Cody appeared clearly agitated by the end of the conversation. When they arrived at Jordan's house, she realized her phone was low on battery and she had left her charger at work. She got back in her car and went to work, leaving Cody in the garage. Later, she received a text from Cody saying he was going for a ride with someone. When she returned home after work, she found her husband was not home. He had gone out in a dark-colored car with Washington state plates. This is nothing unusual, because Cody loved cars and often went to races with new friends, sometimes late at night. She did not report him missing for fear that if he returned, he would realize she had overreacted. Cody and Jordan's group of friends quickly set out to access Cody's social media accounts, hoping to find information about his whereabouts. They obtained a call log and learned that he received a call from a Washington number around the time Jordan mentioned. Since Jordan recalled seeing a car with Washington plates, this was already a lead. The police traced the plate to a man named Jose. Upon questioning, Jose explained that he had called Cody about some tools he had borrowed. The conversation was ordinary, and Jose couldn't recall anything significant related to Cody at that time. Jose is no longer a suspect because he has an alibi, although the police found it odd due to the Washington plates on the car. It's been 3 days since Cody was last seen and police still have no more leads. The search for he intensified. Everyone joined the search day and night. Volunteers joined in, and his family and friends did everything they to find him. They visited the police station to answer various questions, but the responses often didn't align. Jordan was mistaken in her testimony when talking about her time and actions. Jordan explained that Cody left without telling her where he was going or who he was with. Then, she suddenly mentioned receiving a message from he, saying he needed to go for a ride with friends. She also noted that whenever Cody's friends visited, he always took them to Glacier Park for a trip. The investigator highlighted that her story about her husband's disappearance differed from the police's information and urged her to be completely honest. One day, Jordan and her mother went to the police station and showed them an email she had received that morning from a stranger named Tony. The email briefly stated that Tony wanted Jordan to know that there was no need to look for Cody anymore because he was gone. They should stop looking. The email also mentioned that he had gone hiking with friends that night and had fallen off a cliff. Everyone was shocked and assumed that he was dead. It was discovered that Jordan knew Tony. He was a co-worker of Cody's. The police tracked down Tony and asked him to testify. Tony explained that he hadn't seen Cody for some time and hadn't been in contact because Cody was busy preparing for his wedding. He had not used his email recently. He provided all of his phone and computer data to the investigation, and the police concluded that Tony was not involved. Using the details from the email, Jordan organized his own search group and ventured into the rugged and winding terrain. Due to the park's vast size, everyone was aware that the search might drag on for weeks. The following day, the search continued. Jordan led the team in a specific direction, as if she was on a mission to reach a particular location. They drove through many roads and cliffs, any of which could have been Cody's path. Jordan told her friends she wanted to find a certain place Cody had dreamed of visiting. Jordan suddenly stopped the car and jumped out near the loop trail. Next to the trail was a steep slope filled with rocks and tree roots, appearing very dangerous. Undeterred, Jordan climbed over the fence and made her way to the edge. She looked down and shouted to the others that she saw someone at the bottom of the ravine. She claimed it was Cody and called the others over. The search party contacted the park rangers, but since it was already getting dark and too risky to descend, the search was postponed until morning. At 8 a.m. on July 12th, the search for Cody came to a tragic end. Rescuers used ropes tied to trees to descend. Then, they discovered a blue sneaker, identical to the one Cody wore on the day he disappeared. At the bottom, they found Cody face down in the shallow water near the waterfall. Beside him lay a small piece of black cloth, and he was missing his wedding ring. As news spread, friends and family wondered why Cody was at that location at night. Cody's friend, Eddie, mentioned that while Cody enjoyed sightseeing and long walks, he never ventured off the trail, especially in the dark, and was afraid of heights. Cody always hikes on safely fenced trails in lower areas. He once confided to a friend that his fear of heights was so severe that he couldn't even climb a ladder to change a light bulb at his mother's house. Shortly after Cody was found, Jordan posted a wedding photo on Instagram. She said she missed Cody very much, saying that not a day went by without her thinking about him. He was in her heart forever and that she knew he was in a better place now, watching over her as her angel. She said she loved him with all her heart and soul, and hoped to see him again one day. 2 weeks later, the police were still searching for answers about the mysterious email. During the investigation, Cody was buried. At his funeral, Jordan spent the entire time staring at her phone, showing no emotion. Maybe this is how she gets over her pain, but her friend, Kimberly, who witnessed the wedding, thought the behavior was too strange. Kimberly went to the police station to provide information for the investigation. She told the officer that she had been receiving messages from Jordan a few weeks before and following Cody and Jordan's wedding. She recounted conversations with Jordan before the wedding, mentioning that Jordan seemed more excited about the wedding itself than about Cody's feelings. It seemed that Jordan enjoyed the prospect of being a bride more than the reality of being a wife. Friends noticed that Cody seemed more in love with Jordan than she was with him. Kimberly recalled Jordan questioning whether marrying Cody was the right choice. Jordan was very anxious about the wedding night and wondered if she was making a mistake by getting married. The night after the wedding, Jordan messaged she, expressed uncertainty about everything that happened on the wedding night, and mentioned that a lot had happened. When she wanted to hear more details about what happened, Jordan insisted that it was a conversation best had in person rather than over the phone. During several days of texting, Jordan shared with Kimberly that she had told Cody she was on her period to avoid having sex. But they were supposed to discuss it today. Jordan later mentioned that if her husband forced her to do something, she might have a mental breakdown. On the evening of July 7th, after having dinner with friends, Kimberly received another message from Jordan. In it, Jordan said stating that she wanted to talk to Cody about her true feelings. Kimberly wished them understanding and resolution. Later, at 9 p.m., Jordan appeared at Kimberly's door, saying the conversation hadn't gone well. Cody had gotten angry, and she had left to see her brother. From all this, it seems that from the very beginning, Jordan knew where to find Cody. Her testimony about him wanting to go to Glacier Park that day, and her silence about his disappearance seemed suspicious. Kimberly had a gut feeling that Jordan was involved in Cody's death. Detectives were already skeptical of Jordan's story, given the numerous inconsistencies in her account. Their suspicions grew when Kimberly provided evidence in the form of text messages. Then, the police discovered the IP address of the email, which revealed that it was created and sent from Jordan's father's house. This contradicted Jordan's claim that Cody had left that night and they spent it apart. Recordings of phone conversations revealed that Jordan was lying, as both phones and their owners were in Glacier Park at 9:15 p.m. Using this time frame, police obtained CCTV footage from the park's entrance, which showed Cody's car and both Cody and Jordan inside. Jordan was then asked to come to the police station and tell the truth about what happened that night. During questioning, Jordan was forced to recount what happened on the day of the incident. She revealed that she had opened up to Cody about her feelings, which led to a heated argument. Cody suggested that if she truly felt this way, they should consider annulling their marriage. However, Jordan was hesitant, fearing the potential damage to her reputation that would come with getting divorced just 8 days after their wedding. Then, they got into their car and drove to a national park, and they continued their argument. At one point, Jordan mentioned something about a blindfold. As they walked across a bridge and climbed over a fence, their argument escalated. Jordan suggested that they should wait a bit before getting married, but Cody disagreed. They continued to argue. Eventually, Cody tried to grab she. However, she said the incident that followed was a result of anger. Despite her assertion that it was an accident, but the policeman did not believe it. Instead of running for help, Jordan attempted to forge an email on her father's computer. The question remains as to why Cody the need to climb over the edge of the cliff, especially if he was afraid of heights. Even for those who aren't afraid of heights, climbing a 300-foot cliff in the dark and blindfolded is a huge challenge. According to recent information, Jordan was charged with the murder of Cody Johnson just 8 days after their wedding. She will be released, but placed under house arrest and must undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Friends of Cody believe that everything is progressing well and that justice will soon be served. Jordan was initially arrested and charged with second-degree murder and perjury. But these charges were later increased. The prosecutor's office first charged Jordan with second-degree murder for allegedly pushing her husband, Cody, off a cliff in Glacier National Park. However, her charges were later upgraded to first-degree murder. Some of Jordan's friends, who have known her since childhood, mentioned that she was crying hysterically before reaching the altar and seemed to have no joy about getting married. Many people noticed her strange behavior, observing that she acted as if nothing had happened, showing no emotion. When Jordan's trial began, her defense team argued for a second-degree murder conviction, claiming it was an accident during a heated argument. However, the prosecution insisted it was more than an accident. Evidence suggested that Jordan told Cody she had a surprise for him, and a bandage-like item was found near the body, indicating a deliberate act. Additionally, phone calls, text messages, a fake email, her failure to notify anyone of her husband's disappearance, and her lack of emotion after the incident strengthened the prosecution's case, suggesting that Jordan may have planned the murder and intended to blame someone else. On the second day of the hearing, prosecutors gathered evidence that undermined Jordan's defense strategy. During the trial, a video of the police interrogations was shown, revealing to the jury how she lied to the police sergeant. She also deceived her own sixth brother, who testified that during the search, he cried and begged her to tell the truth, but she lied again. On December 13, 2013, just 4 days after the trial began, Jordan's defense announced that she entered the courthouse as a free woman and left in handcuffs. She surprised everyone by changing her plea to second-degree murder. Jordan stood before the judge and admitted the truth about what happened in Glacier National Park. She said at the time she wasn't considering the consequences and recklessly pushed Cody. When she pleaded guilty, Cody's mother began to cry. Contrary, her parents remained silent throughout the trial and left the courthouse quietly at the end, leaving their daughter in the custody of the U.S. Marshals. As a result of her guilty plea, Jordan Graham was sentenced to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the first-degree murder charge and 1 count of perjury. Jordan filed an appeal to withdraw her guilty plea on March 26, 2014, but the appeal was denied. After everything ended, Cody's friends tried to make sense of what truly happened. They insisted that, despite any anger or frustration Cody felt towards Jordan, but he loved her. He would be willing to end the marriage if it would make Jordan happy. No one could figure out why Jordan killed her husband. She came from a religious family with strict rules, and perhaps in her youth, she made some mistakes and feared confessing to her husband. Alternatively, due to her parental upbringing, she may not be ready for a marital relationship, leading to psychological trauma and shyness towards men. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Marlene Oakes. Marlene was born in December 1954 to her parents Lorraine and Billy. At the age of 16, she married a much older man, Bill Major, who was 26 at the time. Despite the large age difference, they quickly got along. The same year they got married, they welcomed their first son, Donald. 4 years later, they had a daughter named Lalana. The family lived in Verona, a small town in the suburbs of Kentucky, USA. Verona is located near downtown Cincinnati. Bill worked as an auto mechanic, and according to Marlene's father, he was ambitious and had a great ability to persuade others. This gave him a big advantage in his job. His auto repair shop was located near the interstate. A convenient location helps him always have many customers. At that time, Marlene was a housewife, taking care of the children, while Bill was the main breadwinner for the family. However, their marriage was not a happy one. They argued frequently, and Bill often abused his wife. One day, a man named Glenn St. Hilaire arrived in town and quickly befriended Bill. He began working at Bill's shop, handling a variety of tasks. Originally from Canada, Glenn owned welding equipment and had extensive knowledge of cars, thus becoming a valuable assistant to Bill. He lives in a trailer near Bill's house, and eventually, he and Marlene developed feelings for each other. After that, they had an affair with each other. Bill was always at work, which gave Glenn and Marlene the freedom to meet. Marlene felt drawn to Glenn, who was younger, calmer, and made her feel at ease. By October 1980, Marlene was 25 years old, while Bill was 35. He frequently resorted to violence against her, keeping the entire family in a state of fear. In this stressful situation, it is not surprising that she sought comfort from Glenn. At the time, Donald was 8 years old and Lalana was 4. Strangely, Bill not only tolerated her relationship with Glenn, but even encouraged it. Those close to the family were aware of the situation and found it shocking. However, events soon took a tragic turn. On the afternoon of October 11, 1980, Bill and Marlene had a big argument in their backyard, and the neighbors could hear it clearly. Later that evening, Bill took his children, Donald and Lalana, to a neighbor's house, asking them to care for the kids for a day due to serious family issues. He told the neighbors that Marlene had run off with Glenn and that he needed time to process everything. The neighbors, however, knew that he was enraged over Marlene's relationship with Glenn. He beat her and the children because of it, and her car was missing. However, no matter Bill's explanation, no one could believe that Marlene, a mother who is wholeheartedly devoted to her children, can leave her children. Afterward, Bill contacted the police and repeated the same story he had shared with the neighbors. However, the details didn't quite add up. Marlene's friends insisted that she deeply loved her children and would never abandon them. They also revealed that she was angry at he because of his abusive behavior. She confided in them that Bill had threatened to kill her if she left him to live with Glenn. A close friend of his even heard him describe in detail how he would kill her if she defied him. He had talked about dismembering her body and hiding the remains so thoroughly that they would never be found. Glenn, Marlene's lover, once heard Bill confess that he would attack her, decapitate her, and destroy her teeth so that the police could not identify her through dental records. Marlene began to fear that her plan to move in with Glenn could put her life in serious danger. In her diary, she wrote that Bill would only agree to sign divorce papers if she promised not to report his abuse of her and the children to the authorities. She was in a difficult position, not knowing what to do. She was exhausted by the toxic relationship and wanted to escape her controlling husband, but she was terrified of the fallout. Despite this, the police launched an investigation into her disappearance. She was officially declared a missing person. She was described as a petite woman with blonde hair and glasses. At the time she went missing, she had been wearing jeans and a blue-green checkered shirt. Her car was also reported missing. On October 11, 1980, Marlene called her sister to talk about the problems in her marriage. She was looking for advice, but her sister didn't know how to help. She said she planned to file for divorce and fight for full custody of her children. She also shared another reason for her decision. Bill had been harassing their 8-year-old son, Donald. She felt very scared and could not bear it. She warned Bill to never touch the children again and threatened to kill him if he did. This made he furious. Marlene confided to her sister that she had evidence of Bill's abuse of Donald and had hidden it in a safe place where he could not find it. She assured her that if anything happened to her, the evidence would be turned over to the police. Later that day, she called her sister again, but this time she sounded very distressed. She had just had another argument with Bill. Marlene then gave Glenn her diary, which contained all the important incident. She told him that if she ever went missing, detectives could find answers in the pages of her diary. She also told her sister the same thing during their phone call. That was the last time her family ever heard from her. On the night of October 11, Glenn arrived at Bill's house after midnight and found the area around the trailer in disarray. Around 3 a.m., he encountered Bill and asked about Marlene. Bill claimed that Marlene had run away. However, he found this hard to believe. He had recently seen she, and she had no intention of leaving her kids behind. He knew she was a mother who was always devoted to her children, so she would never abandon them. It soon became clear to everyone that Bill was lying. During this time, the children had actually been staying with neighbors. He was the one who brought them there and told them that Marlene had run away with a lover. His story was riddled with contradictions, and he kept changing his account. Then, when Bill arrived at his neighbor's house, He even handed over all of his weapons to them to take care of the children, including a 9mm handgun and a .22 caliber rifle. He also sold his tractor to another neighbor, explaining that he was moving to live closer to his parents. A few days after Marlene's disappearance, Bill went to the police station to report the incident. He said that after an argument at home, she had left, and he was convinced that she had run away with her lover. Following this, Glenn also contacted the police and provided information about the conflicts in the relationship between Marlene and Bill. He handed over to the police everything related to Marlene, including the diaries she had left with him. These diaries contained clues that were detrimental to Bill. Glenn also recounted Bill's unusual behavior after Marlene's disappearance. According to him, Bill's transfer of weapons to neighbors and the sale of valuable assets were very suspicious. This showed that Bill seemed to be planning to run away. He believed that Bill was involved in Marlene's disappearance. After speaking with Glenn, the police began investigating Marlene's case more thoroughly. They believed that she did not simply run away from her husband, Bill, but that the matter may be more serious. It is very likely that one of the two men, Bill or Glenn, was involved in this disappearance. Bill and Glenn were both considered prime suspects in the case. However, both denied any involvement. Glenn was cooperative and willingly shared all the information he had with the police. Bill, on the other hand, gave conflicting testimony and behaved strangely during a polygraph test, makes him more suspicious. At this time, the police reviewed Marlene's diary, which details the motive for the crime and even hints at what Bill may have done to her. However, there was still not enough evidence to charge Bill with murder. No evidence or trace of the incident was found in the trailer, the area surrounding the vehicle, or at the auto repair shop. The police spoke to Marlene's children, Donald and Lalana. They paid particular attention to 8-year-old Donald, hoping he might be able to provide some information, especially considering the contents of Marlene's diary. However, the boy was too frightened, making it extremely difficult to gather any information from him. Lalana was not questioned at all because she was too young. Although Donald did not reveal anything useful, but Bill violently beat him after learning about the police interviews. Around the same time, he also began abusing his 4-year-old daughter, Lalana, treating her cruelly. He often took the children to his workplace, where he continued to abuse them. The police also questioned Marlene's sister, who firmly rejected the idea that Marlene would abandon her family and children to be with her lover. According to her sister, she had planned to divorce Bill amicably, gain custody of the children, and then start a new life with Glenn. She has no intention of running away to avoid her problems. At that time, it was known that Marlene had disappeared with the car without taking any personal belongings. But even assuming that she had run away, why would she leave all her important belongings at home, including her wallet, driver's license, money, and jewelry? Furthermore, she did not bring the medications that her doctor had just prescribed. This medication was essential for her, making it unlikely she would leave without it. All of these details did not fit the theory that she had left on her own. Despite extensive investigation, no clues were found. Investigators continued questioning everyone who knew the family. During a conversation with the police, Bill admitted he no longer believed Marlene was alive, which raised suspicions. He also began agreeing with her sister and Glenn that it was unlikely she would have abandoned all her belongings and disappeared without leaving any message. After Marlene disappears, Bill begins to tell Donald and Lalana the whole truth about her relationship, detailing her encounters with her lover, Glenn. He seemed intent on turning the children against their mother. He accused her of drug use, abusing alcohol, and even selling her body. He claimed she had left because she didn't love them anymore. Donald and Lalana grew up thinking that their mother, Marlene, was a troubled person and had abandoned them. This left a deep wound in their souls. They could not understand why she abandoned them. They had no choice but to stay with their father, Bill, who raised them harshly. Lalana later recalled that after her mother's disappearance, Bill became a tyrant. He frequently subjected she and Donald to physical and emotional abuse. On one occasion, he hit Donald so severely that the boy couldn't walk for several days. While the police were still investigating, Bill decided to sell all of his assets, including his home and auto repair shop. He then moved with his children to East Providence, Rhode Island, to be closer to his parents. There, he bought a trailer and stabilized life. The decision to move into a trailer was unusual. Bill gave up a comfortable lifestyle and a successful store in exchange for much more difficult living circumstances. His new home was considered unfavorable and not the best place to raise young children. A year after Marlene's disappearance, he remarried. His new wife was named Pauline. For a long time, they lived together but could not officially marry, because Bill could not legally end his marriage with Marlene. Eventually, he managed to file for divorce and married Pauline. Meanwhile, Glenn stayed in Verona. He found work at a local factory and was one of the few people, along with Marlene's family, who continued to search for answers about her disappearance. He frequently visited the police station to check on the investigation. The police were not only searching for Marlene but also for her car, yet no leads were found. They sent her dental records and other information to nearby cities and states, hoping for a breakthrough. Although the search is still ongoing, there is no sign that Marlene is dead. Police speculate that she have wanted to leave her current life behind to start anew somewhere else. On November 29, 1981, a hunter discovered a partial skull in the woods, a few miles from the old trailer park where Bill's family had lived. The bone was heavily damaged and showed marks from the object that had severed it from the body. For many years, the police were unable to identify the victim. All they could determine was that the bone belonged to a white woman, under 30 years old. There were signs of dismemberment, and the cause of death was determined to be multiple gunshot. As the years passed, Bill continued to live with Pauline, but his treatment of Donald and Lalana became increasingly cruel. At one point, Lalana became so desperate that she confided in her stepmother Pauline, telling her about the abuse. She revealed that Bill had molested Donald and then raped her, threatening to kill them if they spoke out. Pauline was furious when she learned the truth and could not keep quiet. She confronted Bill, warning him that if he did it again, she would call the police. For a while, Bill promised to control himself. By 1985, Bill and Pauline had a child together. By this time, Marlene had been missing for 13 years. Lalana once again confides in Pauline about Bill's harassment. This time, Pauline reported the incident to the police. Bill was arrested, and his children, Donald and Lalana, admitted that they had prayed that he would not return home. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his crimes. After his release, he lost interest in his family. Pauline ended their relationship immediately after his arrest, but she refused to take care of his children, Donald and Lalana. Eventually, they went to live with their maternal grandmother, that is, Marlene's mother. At this point, Lalana asked her grandmother why her mother abandoned her and Donald. The grandmother replied that Marlene abandoned the children only because Bill killed Marlene. She firmly believed he was involved in Marlene's disappearance, though there was no concrete evidence to prove it. After his release from prison, Bill began a relationship with a woman named KLR. He concealed his dark past from her, claiming he had been imprisoned for armed robbery. He did not want her to know about the abuse he had inflicted on his children. The two married and lived happily for a while. However, in 1995, Bill suffered a stroke and became confined to a wheelchair. By then, Lalana was an adult and capable of handling matters on her own. She decided to look into the disappearance of her mother, Marlene. The first step she took was buying a notebook to document all the clues. She then approached Bill and pleaded with him to disclose the location of her mother's remains so that she could provide her with a proper burial. Lalana even promised him that if he told her the truth, she won't report to the police. However, Bill outright refused and told her that if she thought he would reveal where he hid her mother's body, she was crazy. Despite her attempts to persuade him, he remained uncooperative. Understanding that Bill would not help, Lalana launched her own investigation. She began speaking with relatives, close friends, and acquaintances who might have information about her mother, Marlene. During her search, she learned that her mother had kept a diary where she documented significant events in her life. She also discovered that the police had confiscated the diary as evidence back in 1980. She managed to obtain permission to review her mother's case file, including the diary entries. What she read left her deeply shocked. Marlene's diary revealed that she was aware of Bill's abuse of their son, Donald. She also discovered that Bill had been convicted in 1975 for molesting 2 young boys. After learning this, she wrote that all her feelings for her husband, Bill, had vanished. She demanded that he never touch their child again. The diary detailed Bill's erratic behavior and threats, including his frequent boasts about knowing how to commit the perfect crime. He claimed that to avoid identification, one would need to remove all the victim's teeth. Marlene also expressed her plans to file for divorce and seek full custody of her children. In one of her final diary entries, Marlene wrote that she had threatened Bill with divorce, cut off contact between him and his children. He did not want that to happen, but not out of love for them. In 2000, Lalana contacted the police and shared the information from Marlene's diaries. This prompted the police to re-examine the diaries and immediately question Bill and Donald. Donald provided detailed accounts of Bill's cruelty. Lalana also learned that, sometime after Marlene's disappearance, a skull had been discovered in a forested area near their old house. She located the exact spot and visited it herself, hoping to uncover more evidence, but her search was unsuccessful. The police had an important piece of evidence, a skull that had no teeth, which matched what Bill had said about the perfect crime. At the time, identification of remains relied heavily on dental records, as modern identification technology was not available. When experts tried traditional DNA testing, they discovered severe bone damage, making analysis impossible. So they turned to newer technology, specifically mitochondrial DNA analysis. However, the county refused to pay the $120 cost of the study, as it was not certain that it would help the case. Lalana had to raise money to pay for the procedure. For this, she organized a small fund. At that time, such research was conducted only in one laboratory in the United States. The amount of money needed to be raised was huge, but her family were enthusiastic in supporting her. For example, her family members contributed their entire savings to cover the cost of the analysis. Finally, she earned enough money. County forensic experts took DNA samples from Donald and Lalana to compare with the DNA from the skull that was found. The results showed that the skull did indeed belong to Marlene, who had been missing. This confirmed the suspicions of her children and relatives that she had been murdered. Bill learned about the discovery of the skull. Bill's father called the police to report that his son had killed Marlene. According to his account, Bill had attacked her, then dismembered her body and scattered the body parts far apart. To prevent identification, Bill destroyed the upper and lower jaws. Bill also submerged her car in the river, and he also informed the authorities of its location. When they tried to recover the car, they encountered many difficulties due to the strong river currents, which may have pushed the car far from its original location. They tried draining the river and used experienced divers, but the search was complicated. Investigators decided to enlist Bill's father's help in gathering more evidence against Bill. They instructed him to call Bill get a confession during the conversation, and record it. To unnerve Bill, they tell Bill about an investigation initiated by Lalana. Upon hearing that his daughter was looking for Marlene, Bill became enraged and told her to stop looking and forget about her mother. Bill believed the case had long been closed and that he was no longer at risk. Nevertheless, during the recorded phone call, he confessed to the crime. On July 25, 2001, Bill Major was arrested and charged with the murder of Marlene. During the interrogation, Bill admitted to the crime but attempted to place the blame on his wife, Marlene. He claimed they were in her car when she pulled out a gun and began threatening him. According to Bill, a struggle broke out, during which he accidentally attacked her several times. He claimed that there were 2 bullets in her head and 4 in her body. However, this testimony seems more like intentional than accidental in a fight. The trial started in 2003, when Bill was 59 years old. After suffering a stroke in 1995, he had lost the ability to walk and appeared in court in a wheelchair. During the trial, his children, Donald and Lalana, testified about the abuse and violence they endured during their childhood. They recounted what happened inside the family trailer. Bill's lawyer argued that his actions were linked to nervous tension, claiming that Marlene frequently threatened him, leading to emotional breakdowns. The defense also argued that the murder was an act of self-defense. After a lengthy argument from the defense attorney, Bill looked at his children and smiled, clearly satisfied with the attorney's presentation. He was confident he would remain a free man. However, Lalana smiled back at her father and expressed her hope that he would spend the rest of his life in prison for what he had done to them and to Marlene. After deliberating for over 40 minutes, the jury found Bill Major guilty of Marlene's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. On December 7, 2016, Bill applied for parole, but his request was denied. He died in prison on October 15, 2020. Lalana was satisfied with the outcome of the investigation. She had spent much of her life pursuing justice. She believes that Bill murdered Marlene at that time because he suspected Marlene's of having an affair. She believes that Bill meticulously planned the murder out of fear of going to jail and wanting to maintain control over his children, which would allow him to continue to torment them. Notably, Bill's children, Donald and Lalana, refused to take their father's last name. Lalana later changed it to her husband's. She regrets that during her childhood, she was influenced by her domineering father, causing her to mistakenly believe that her mother had abandoned her. The rest of Marlene's body and her car were never found. However, her family took solace in the fact that justice had been served. Only her mutilated skull was buried. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nicole Brown Simpson. Nicole Brown Simpson was born in Frankfurt, Germany, in 1959 and had an older sister named Denise. Looking for a fresh start, Nicole's family moved to the United States, settling in Garden Grove, California. She was later joined by 2 younger sisters, Dominique and Tanya. Nicole quickly adapted to life in America. With her blonde hair and gentle personality, she won the hearts of those around her. In 1977, an important meeting took place at a prestigious club in Beverly Hills, where Nicole worked as a waitress. She met Orenthal James Simpson, a football star at the height of his fame, who was also involved in acting and advertising. Orenthal was married to Marguerite and had 3 children, but a relationship formed between Nicole and Orenthal. The 12-year age gap did not seem to be a problem for them. However, tragedy struck when Orenthal's son drowned in a swimming pool accident, which deeply affected the family and strained their relationship. Orenthal and Marguerite then divorced, and he began dating Nicole officially. In 1985, Nicole married Orenthal in a lavish mansion located in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. After the marriage, she adopted her husband's last name and became known as Nicole Brown Simpson. However, her life changed dramatically during their marriage. The couple had 2 children, Sydney, born in 1985, and Justin, born in 1987. Nicole was a devoted mother who chose to care for her children herself, engaging in activities with them and planning family vacations. Besides taking care of her children, she started a small interior decoration business. Although it seemed like they had a perfect family life, this idyllic situation was not meant to last. Orenthal repeatedly cheated on his wife and treated her badly. The first warning sign of his abusive behavior was when he took a children's baseball bat and smashed a Mercedes. Although the incident was recorded, Nicole chose not to press charges. His lack of consequences only made his behavior worse, leading to increased violence. Friends reported bruises on Nicole, and Orenthal threatened to kill her. She called the police several times during his attacks. Orenthal admitted to mistreating Nicole and admitted to hitting her, but he claimed that both parties were at fault. The judge ordered Orenthal to complete 12 hours of community service and pay a $200 fine. The couple continued to argue, and after 7 years of marriage, Nicole filed for divorce in 1990. Nicole occasionally contacted Orenthal and attempted to reconcile with him, partly due to pressure from her parents, whose business relied heavily on Orenthal's support. These efforts were unsuccessful, however. Nicole and her children moved into a rented house in Brentwood. After the divorce, Nicole received a $430,000 settlement and $10,000 in monthly child support. In December 1992, while skiing in Aspen, Colorado, Nicole met Cato Kalin. They became close friends, and Cato moved into a guest house on Nicole's property for a year. He paid rent and helped care for her kids. Despite getting a restraining order against Orenthal for stalking, Nicole felt paranoid, believing she saw him everywhere. In January 1994, for safety reasons, Nicole and her children moved to a different 3-story rental house in the same area. Cato also relocated with them, renting a guest house in her yard. Slowly, life started to get better, and Nicole had big plans for the future. Just before the tragic events, Nicole met and began talking to Ronald Goldman. That day, she attended a dance concert for her daughter. Her ex-husband Orenthal was also present. After the concert, around 6 p.m., Nicole and her children went to their favorite restaurant for dinner, where they met Ronald. They chatted for a while, and then Nicole returned home to her children. Nicole accidentally left her glasses at a restaurant and Ronald found them. He decided to bring them to her at her home in Los Angeles. However, this meeting led to a tragic situation. At 10:45 p.m., Cato, Nicole's neighbor, heard unusual noises from her house and went outside to investigate. He noticed Nicole's dog acting strangely and upon closer inspection saw blood and bodies, prompting him to call 911. When police arrived, they discovered a horrific scene. Nicole and Ronald's bodies were found dead. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times. An autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed 7 times in the neck and head, along with a deep cut to her throat. Due to Orenthal's history of abusing Nicole during their marriage and his recent stalking, he quickly became the prime suspect in the double murder. Police began investigating the case, and a witness came forward. The limousine driver reported that he had taken the soccer star Orenthal to the Los Angeles airport, where he caught a flight to Chicago, arriving at 5:30 a.m. Later, airline employees were interviewed, including a flight attendant who mentioned that Orenthal kept his hands in his gym bag throughout the flight, implying that he was trying to hide something. Later, Orenthal checked into the Orr Plaza Hotel at 6:15 a.m. and received the keys for room 915. Approximately 30 minutes later, A man at a gas station told police he saw someone resembling Orenthal digging in the woods near the hotel. Los Angeles police contacted Orenthal and asked him to come back for questioning, and he agreed. While in his hotel room, he made 10 phone calls, including one to a woman named Katie, as well as calls to airlines and a car rental service. He purchased tickets for a flight back to Los Angeles and requested a car to take him to the airport. The reason for his call to Katie is still unclear. Later, Orenthal contacted the LAPD at 8:21 a.m. to inform them that he would be returning soon. A hotel employee noted that at 8:30 a.m., Orenthal went to the lobby, visibly upset that his car had not yet arrived, as he was in a hurry to reach the airport. In a fit of rage, he slammed his hand into a wall, causing it to bleed. He then asked a hotel employee to bandage his hand. A car finally arrived 5 minutes later, and Orenthal was taken to the airport, where he boarded a 9:15 a.m. flight back to Los Angeles. Police flew to Chicago after receiving a tip from an eyewitness. With the support of local police, they searched the wooded area near the hotel using metal detectors, anticipating that Orenthal had concealed the murder weapon, a knife, there. However, their search was unsuccessful. They also searched the hotel room and found bloody sheets, broken glass, and a torn piece of paper with a person's name on it. They also collected fingerprints and blood found on the bathroom floor. After Orenthal returned to Los Angeles, he arrived at the murder scene at 11:00 a.m. Orenthal was then arrested and taken to the police station. He was offered a lie detector test, but he refused. This raised further suspicion. Orenthal pleaded not guilty, but Nicole's family believed that he was responsible for her and Ronald's deaths. However, there was no evidence against him at the time, so he was released. Orenthal seized the opportunity and escaped in his white car. Police from Fort Bronca then began a pursuit, and all nearby patrol cars joined in the pursuit. Police chased Orenthal's white Ford along the highway. Several camera-equipped helicopters followed the car, along with patrol cars. After traveling 100 kilometers, police stopped the Ford and arrested Orenthal, who became the prime suspect in a double murder case. During the investigation, a friend of Nicole's reported that Orenthal had said he would kill Nicole if he caught her. At the time of her murder, Nicole was in her yard with Ronald, which may have sparked jealousy and violent behavior from Orenthal, who had a history of violence. Family members have mentioned that Orenthal had mental health issues. He suffered from migraines and sometimes talked to himself when he forgot to take his medication. A lengthy and complicated trial ensued, attracting national attention. The prosecution portrayed Orenthal as a man whose jealousy had spiraled out of control, leading him to commit the murder. The prosecution presented evidence of Orenthal's guilt, including a bloody shoe print of a size 10, matching the size he wore, found at the crime scene. In addition, to the left of these prints, drops of blood were found. A bloody glove and a knitted hat, possibly belonging to the perpetrator, were also discovered. Hours after the murder, police observed multiple cuts on Orenthal's left hand. These injuries were linked to the blood found at the scene. Blood was also found in Orenthal's car, and analysis confirmed that the blood at the crime scene matched his blood type. From the beginning, Orenthal and his legal team worked hard to prove his innocence. The defense pointed to flaws in the police investigation. They argued that the crime scene was handled by inexperienced forensic scientists, and that the crime scene was not properly secured, which could have led to evidence contamination. They argued that the evidence presented was unreliable. By rigorously cross-examining the prosecution's witnesses, the defense sought to undermine their credibility. Although the witnesses gave explanations for each issue, the jury still doubted the reliability of some of the evidence. The prosecution argued that he killed Nicole and Ronald out of jealousy. Reports of domestic violence were revealed. However, the defense claimed that Orenthal was the victim of a racist police frame-up This defense strategy resonated with many African Americans who had experienced injustice and discrimination in the legal system. The idea that dark skin was a significant factor in police bias gained traction, leading to significant public support for Orenthal. Meanwhile, many white Americans continued to believe that he was guilty. Orenthal stated that he represented not only his own interests, but also the interests of all Americans. He was extremely popular in the 1960s, a time when Black Americans were starting to protest against oppression. Orenthal was pivotal in highlighting racial inequalities in the U.S. Throughout this effort, several corrupt officials within the upper levels of power, especially from the Los Angeles Police Department, were uncovered. However, there is still much debate about Orenthal's guilt in the murder case. It is suspected that the issue of racial discrimination was deliberately introduced to mislead the jury. Meanwhile, the prosecution firmly argued that Orenthal was the culprit. They presented evidence collected at the crime scene. After examining Orenthal's pool, prosecutors presented evidence of his abusive relationship with Nicole. However, Orenthal denied these allegations during his trial, and surprisingly, the jury appeared to ignore them. The prosecution also highlighted his attempts to evade justice. In response, the defense argued that he feared for his life because of the racist attitudes of the Los Angeles police, claiming that he was worried about being shot before he could explain his story. The prosecutor said, "Just before her death, Nicole confided to a friend that she feared for her life and well-being because Orenthal sometimes lost control. He was described as jealous." Nicole's diary contained relevant entries that the prosecutor's office used throughout the trial. One of the main pieces of evidence that pointed to Orenthal's guilt was a bloody glove found at the crime scene. A similar glove was later found by police at Orenthal's home. Additionally, a former police officer has published a book detailing various pieces of evidence that point to Orenthal's guilt. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the glove to the court and asked Orenthal to try it on. And it turned out that the glove did not fit him. The glove was so tight that he would have difficulty holding or using a knife. It seems that the prosecution's decision to have Simpson try on the glove was a mistake. The prosecutor's office attempted to indict Orenthal, although there is no direct evidence that he was involved in this tragedy. The defense argued that the real criminal responsible for the deaths was still at large. To bolster their case, the prosecution organized a tour of Orenthal's home, inviting jurors and defense representatives. During the tour, several photos were displayed on the walls, showing Orenthal with members of the Black community. This appeared to be intended to suggest a connection between him and the crime, in an attempt to discredit Orenthal. The visitors included people who knew Orenthal, and they confirmed that they had never seen these photos before. Was the prosecution orchestrating a conspiracy to frame an innocent person? The trial lasted 16 months, during which Orenthal was under house arrest. After both sides presented their closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations. 4 hours later, they returned with a verdict of not guilty for Orenthal James Simpson on charges of double murder. He was acquitted. Orenthal smiled and thanked the jury, and 2 jurors smiled back. However, when the jury left the courtroom, the families of the victims were disappointed with the verdict. The verdict brought a range of emotions. Orenthal's fans celebrated, believing it was a victory for their idol, while the African American community saw it as a significant achievement for their race. Nicole and Ronald's families, on the other hand, were outraged. The trial attracted widespread attention. 9 months after the verdict, Orenthal met with a news reporter to discuss the difficulties he faced after the trial. He mentioned that he had built a career in sports and film, but a long break and reputation issues caused that career to collapse. During this time, he focused on his children and friends. When his ex-wife was alive, their children lived with her. After she passed away, Her relatives took the children away during the proceedings. Now, he is fighting for custody of his daughter and son. In 1996, after the criminal trial concluded, the judge granted Orenthal's request for full custody of him and Nicole. Nicole's parents were furious about the ruling and continued to seek custody, but were unsuccessful. They finally dropped their bid in 2006. In December, a civil lawsuit was filed against Orenthal by the families of Nicole and Ronald. This time, the proceedings moved quickly, with the prosecutor's office presenting strong arguments and compelling evidence against Orenthal. This included incontrovertible evidence such as photographs from the time of his arrest, showing him wearing the same shoes that had left prints at the crime scene. This time, Orenthal was confident and decided not to hire an experienced legal team. However, the situation was more complicated than he expected. The case progressed, resulting in a $3.5 million settlement awarded to the victims' families. However, Orenthal never paid most of that money. After these events, he tried to revive his career and later wrote a book. In this book, he recounts how he would commit the murder if he were guilty. The controversial work has outraged the victims' families, who still believe Orenthal was responsible for the murders of Nicole and Ronald. The proceeds from the book's sale were given to the family of Ronald, who was murdered. After the hearings, the case of the double murder faded from public attention and remained inactive for many years. The murder weapon, a knife, was never located. In 2016, the Los Angeles police reported that a retired police had submitted a knife, which was supposedly found years earlier by a construction worker during the demolition of Orenthal's house. However, testing revealed that this knife was not the murder weapon. In 2007, when he and a group of armed men broke into the home of a local sports memorabilia seller, Orenthal later claimed that they were only trying to retrieve valuable items that he considered family heirlooms, for which the two parties had previously been unable to agree on a price. Orenthal maintained that the sole purpose of the break-in was to reclaim his property. Orenthal tried to steal a sports trophy, so he hired the best legal team to defend him in court. It seemed like his situation was dire, especially after police discovered that he and 4 others had used weapons to trespass on someone else's property. Orenthal was charged with 2 counts of robbery and assault with a weapon. Orenthal James Simpson was sentenced to 33 years in prison. The lawyers argued that a 33-year sentence for a failed robbery, with no injuries involved, is excessive. Despite their arguments, the court maintained that its decision was in line with state law, and the appeals were denied. Orenthal was in prison. Some saw him as a champion of justice, while others saw him as a ruthless killer who deserved to be locked up. During his time in prison, tensions between the black community and the police escalated, leading to a number of disturbing incidents. Orenthal was incarcerated for nearly 9 years. At the age of 70, he was unexpectedly paroled under a new amendment aimed at rehabilitating prisoners. After a vote by the board, he was released in October 2017. After these events, Orenthal spent the rest of his life in a peaceful environment surrounded by his loved ones. His children, a son and a daughter from Nicole, believe that their father was wrongly convicted and a victim of discrimination. There is currently no update on the resolution of the murder case of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. The true nature of Orenthal remains controversial. Was he a fighter for justice? Or was he a ruthless killer who used his wealth and influence to escape the consequences of his actions? Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll dive into a new case. The case of Kelly Bullwinkle. Kelly Bullwinkle was born in Petaluma, Sonoma County, California, United States. She is the only child of Diana Dolores Gonzalez, a Coast Guard sergeant, and Robert. When Kelly was 3 years old, her parents divorced and she lived with her mother. Despite her busy work schedule, Diana raised Kelly with love and dedication, and they often received help from Kelly's grandparents, Dolores Fuller and Jesus Gonzalez, who often traveled from Las Cruces, New Mexico to visit. Growing up, Kelly was a quiet and shy girl, but those who knew her were captivated by her delicate features. She had a deep love for animals, especially horses. Whenever she saw a horse, her face lit up with joy, and she eagerly asked her mother to keep one as a pet. Kelly was also passionate about music. She quickly learned to play the clarinet while still in elementary school, impressing everyone with her ability to perform complex pieces with incredible skill. In 1999, as Kelly prepared to start high school, Diana was transferred to Redlands, a picturesque city in San Bernardino County, California. The family moved in with Laura, a close friend of Diana's. The relocation brought major changes to Kelly's life. She had to meet new neighbors, start at a new school, and adjust to an unfamiliar environment, all of which proved difficult for her. Redlands East Valley High School, the largest in the city, and presented its own challenges. The school was divided into cliques, athletes, leaders, and laggards, making it hard for Kelly to find her place. Even walking through the noisy cafeteria at lunchtime felt overwhelming. Kelly often felt lonely and doubted her ability to fit in with her school community. To relieve stress, she turned to reading and started keeping a personal diary, which became her trusted outlet. Over time, Kelly took up mountain biking and joined the track and field team. Her dedication to sports paid off as she began to succeed in competitions. Eventually, one of Kelly's childhood dreams came true when her mother gifted her a horse as a reward for her efforts. In her third year of high school, Kelly became friends with two classmates, Rachel Schneider and Megan LaSmith. Like many teenagers, Kelly looked up to Rachel and began imitating her style. She dyed her hair red to match Rachel's, started shopping at thrift stores, and wore the same shade of red lipstick as her. In 2001, Rachel introduced Kelly to her other friends, including Kinsey Jean Nordman. Kinsey, a senior born in 1983 in Redlands, was the only child of Bruce and Deborah Nordman. Her father, a well-known local postman, and her mother, a devoted leader of a Girl Scout group, raised Kinsey in a loving and optimistic environment. From a young age, Kinsey was described by relatives as sweet, kind, and affectionate. She had a gentle nature, enjoyed football games and reading, and was passionate about helping sick and homeless animals, often turning her home into a temporary shelter for them. Her family fully supported her interests, creating a joyful and encouraging atmosphere. Birthdays were always memorable celebrations, and family trips were filled with happiness. Bruce enjoyed spending time with Kinsey's friends and often invited them on family outings. One frequent visitor to the Nordman household was Kinsey's cousin, who taught everyone how to surf. During high school, Kinsey grew close to a classmate named Damian Matthew Guerrero, born in 1983. Damian lived in a wealthy neighborhood near Redlands. Not much was known about his family, which included his mother, stepfathers, and brother. He was known for his arrogance and fascination with Gothic culture. His signature look included makeup, black and white outfits, and a vintage 1940s style hat. Girls admired him for his dark hair and enigmatic presence, while others were intrigued by his knack for turning any topic into a philosophical discussion, making conversations with him engaging. He often quoted lines from Quentin Tarantino films, as Tarantino was his idol. Even though he was weirdo, but Damian was both hardworking and academically capable. Under Damian's influence, Kelly underwent a significant transformation. She abandoned her sporty California style and adopted a Gothic look. She developed a strong interest in writing articles about serial killers. She became interested in writing about serial killers, a subject she was very passionate about. She also became drawn to industrial bands, with Tool becoming her favorite. Her favorite movie was American Psycho. She and Damian often discussed the film's characters, Mickey and Mallory, with their classmates, praising them enthusiastically. Kelly's family disapproved of the changes in her behavior and began keeping a closer eye on her social circle. However, her cousin reacted differently. He welcomed Damien and even started visiting him frequently. The two grew close, bonding over shared interests and collections. They were particularly fascinated by a mysterious weapon Damien owned, which had once belonged to Damien's brother. Over time, Diana became increasingly concerned about her daughter's friendship with Damien. Despite her mother's strong disapproval of her relationship with Damien, Kelly refused to change her mind. This caused a rift between her and her mother, further straining their relationship. Diana believed that Kelly was only trying to mock her, provoke her, and draw attention to Kelly. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating at school that Kelly and Damien's relationship was more than just friendship. In reality, however, Damien was dating another girl, Jennifer. Jennifer, born in Redlands in 1985, was known for her bold appearance and impeccable sense of style. Damien fell for her almost instantly after their first conversation. They discovered they shared many interests, particularly in music and cinema. Jennifer attended building with Kelly, while Kinsey studied in a different building. Although different, Kelly and Kinsey quickly bonded over their shared love of writing. Eventually, Kelly joined the group formed by Kinsey, Damien, and Jennifer, who welcomed her without hesitation. Kelly began adopting not only the fashion choices, but also the behaviors of her new friends. This group displayed a deliberate disregard for social norms and seemed unafraid or even eager to be rejected by society. Immersing herself in this circle, Kelly created a virtual diary on LiveJournal under the pseudonym Anna, where she portrayed herself as a girl struggling with anorexia. Though this was untrue, Kelly was fascinated by the idea of taking on this new persona. At the same time, she began experimenting with illegal substances. Despite only dabbling in them, she started labeling herself as a banned substance addict. It seemed as though Kelly was determined to showcase her darkest, most flawed side. She deliberately became provocative and destructive. Wanting to fully embrace her new identity, she distanced herself from Rachel, who quickly noticed how negatively the group was influencing her friend. However, fractures soon developed within the group itself. The conflict was fueled by Kelly's growing and uncontrollable attraction to Damien, which Jennifer easily noticed. On top of that, Jennifer was irritated by the fact that Kelly, trying to please Damien, copied his style and behavior. The tension steadily escalated, and what had once been a normal friendship between the girls devolved into open rivalry. In 2002, the group had the opportunity to become the center of attention and spark a wave of discussions, which they seemed to enjoy. That year, Kinsey and Damien graduated from high school. Meanwhile, Kelly and Kinsey came up with the idea to attend prom together. They were not a couple, but the plan was driven by curiosity to see their classmates' reactions. They think that it could possibly create a scandal. During the party, the girls told everyone they were under the influence of banned substance and tried to persuade Damien to join them. Jennifer responded quickly, opposing the idea and urging Damien to refuse. Kelly became upset, believing Jennifer was acting out of jealousy. The tension escalated when Damien's date accused Kelly of lying, pointing out that Kelly was wearing the same shoes as Damien. This led to an exchange of insults, with emotions spiraling out of control. Then, as energetic music played, Kelly and Kinsey kissed on the dance floor, drawing the attention of their classmates. Many speculated that the kiss was merely a stunt to grab everyone's attention. A few hours later, the party ended, and with it, the friends stopped trying to show their worst sides. After starting university, Kinsey and Damien remained close friends and kept in touch with Kelly as well. They often went to the cinema, explored fairs in the city center. Among them, Kelly was the only one without a partner, and Damien was still dating Jennifer. When the trio couldn't meet in person, they stayed connected through chat, where they planned their next outings or shared music and posts they enjoyed. However, due to Jennifer's jealousy, Damien sometimes acted rudely toward Kelly when they met in public. In private, though, his behavior changed, and their interactions became much friendlier. By early 2003, Damien and Kelly confessed their mutual attraction and began a secret relationship. Kelly's happiness was hard to conceal. For Kelly, Damien was the first man who had been truly serious about her, making it difficult for her to resist him. Her life began to change dramatically. Through Kinsey, she got in touch with two local banned substance dealers, Jim and Bob. At one point, Jim and Bob demanded $100 from her to pay for banned substance, but Kelly had grown accustomed to getting them for free. As her addiction worsened, she began finding other ways to sustain her habit. She secured a part-time job at a restaurant. In the spring of 2003, Kelly and Jennifer graduated from high school, but their rivalry only intensified. Now considered a love destroyer, Kelly felt an overwhelming urge to publicly declare her relationship with Damien. She enrolled at Crafton Hills, just a 20-minute drive from her home, allowing her to stay close to Damien. Meanwhile, Jennifer was determined to turn Kelly's friends against her. Jennifer manipulated Kinsey and Damien into excluding Kelly from their group and even encouraged them to humiliate her at parties, inviting her only to mock her in front of others. That summer was a nightmare for Kelly. Her friends argued with her over trivial matters, publicly mocked her, and humiliated her. What hurt even more was that she couldn't understand why they were doing it. Despite this, Kelly, being sensitive and dependent, couldn't bring herself to cut ties with them. For the first time, she wished that Damien would leave Jennifer, but the opposite happened. Damien told Kelly their relationship was over and demanded Kelly stay out of his life. One of the people who had insulted Kelly decided to reveal her secret meetings with Damien to Jennifer, hoping to expose Damien, who Jennifer was planning to build a life with. However, even Damien's betrayals didn't come as a surprise to Jennifer. On September 2, 2003, Jennifer messaged Kelly, demanding an explanation. Kelly confessed everything and received a response filled with threats. A few days later, Kinsey and Damien came up with a cruel prank to play on Kelly. Knowing how easily she got nervous, they decided to take her to San Timoteo Canyon, also known as the Ghost Town. On September 11, while texting with Kelly, Kinsey suggested they go for a walk together. Trusting her friend, Kelly agreed. The next day, Kinsey and Damien headed to San Timoteo Canyon, equipped with a shovel. They dug a deep hole, planning to scare Kelly by making her believe they were going to kill her and bury her there. On September 13, 2003, at 4:20 p.m., Kelly told her family she was going out with friends and left in her Mazda Protege. She had hidden a small bag of banned substance under the waistband of her pants. After stopping briefly at an ATM, she continued driving and met Kinsey. Together, they smoked and casually chatted while walking. Later, Kinsey suggested they grab a snack. As they approached Kelly's car, Damien suddenly arrived in his black Honda Civic. Surprised, Kelly asked what he was doing there. Damien says he has a plan and wants them to join in. After some convincing from her friends, Kelly reluctantly agreed to go to the canyon, even though she didn't like the ghost town. When they were already there, at some point Damien walked away from Kelly and Kinsey for a few minutes, and that's when Kelly found herself face to face with a grave and a shovel. She didn't have time to realize what happened, because Damien suddenly appeared in front of her again with a weapon in his hands. Later, the weapon activated unexpectedly. Seriously wounded, Kelly fell just a few steps from the pit. Kinsey became a witness of the scene. Damien began to justify himself, saying that everything happened by accident. Kelly was still alive at that time and was shaking convulsively. Damien, in a state of shock, handed the weapon to Kinsey and said that he could not do it again. Kinsey took the weapon and, without further ado, attacked Kelly in the head. After that, they put the body in a hole and buried it. Seeing an old orange sofa abandoned nearby by someone, Damien and Kinsey dragged it to a fresh grave and left the scene. In Kelly's car, near the Ontario Mills Shopping Centre, they abandoned the car and keys, then changed clothes and returned to Redlands in Damien's car. A little later, they had dinner together and at 9:20 p.m. went to the cinema. Diana, Kelly's mother, was not at home at that time. She had gone to the sea. Her friend Laura was outside the city. In these circumstances, no one noticed Kelly's absence. However, when Laura returned on September 15, she discovered alarming signs: unsorted mail, lights on, and hungry pets. In addition, Kelly's answering machine had accumulated messages from colleagues who were worried about her due to her absence from work. Laura called the police. Officers began searching for Kelly and found her car within a few hours. When she received news that her daughter was missing, Diana immediately called friends and acquaintances for help. They launched a search throughout the city, the San Bernardino Valley, and the desert. The search for Kelly was assisted by a Hawk helicopter provided by the Coast Guard. The police, meanwhile, interrogated everyone who knew Kelly. The first on the list of her close friends was Kinsey. During the interrogation, she provided a reliable alibi, claiming that she had not seen her friend for a long time. She also admitted that they planned to meet on September 13, but Kelly suddenly stopped communicating. So Kinsey went for a walk with Damien. In addition, she mentioned the banned substance addiction of Kelly and gave investigators the contacts of banned substance dealers Jim and Bob, who could possibly point to Kelly's whereabouts. It turned out that the two were in custody on charges of carjacking, a fact that automatically put them at the top of the list of suspects in Kelly's kidnapping. However, once they were questioned, they began to deny any involvement in her disappearance and claimed to have an alibi. The Manns were involved in a series of crimes in the Redlands area, but had nothing to do with what happened to Kelly. Nevertheless, the police obtained a warrant to search their home and then excluded them from the case. Days passed in despair. Diana took out an ad and told the media about Kelly's disappearance. Kinsey also joined the search and supported the efforts. A few days later, a group of young men were exploring San Timoteo Canyon. Something unusual caught their attention. An unpleasant smell emanated from a cliff next to an old sofa lying in the bushes. After they reported this to the police, officers immediately arrived and secured the area. Under the sofa, human remains were found sticking out of the ground. After that, the site was examined, and a cartridge case of a 9mm caliber was found during the excavation of a female body, which was urgently sent to the morgue for the appropriate forensic analysis. Days later, a preliminary autopsy report confirmed that the deceased was Kelly and that her cause of death was one of 2 bullet wounds. Diana was shocked by the terrible news. A wave of suspicion swept across Redlands as each of the young people came under scrutiny. Those questioned all became potential suspects, and rumors of Kinsey's involvement in the murder began to spread. The police searched the house where Kelly lived and confiscated her computer, on which a lot of materials for the investigation were found, hundreds of chats, threats from Jennifer, and much more. Jennifer was also interrogated, during which she denied her guilt. Simultaneously, there was no convincing evidence against her. When investigators questioned Kelly's cousin, he revealed that he had once seen Damien holding a small silver weapon. After further questioning, Damien admitted that his brother gave him a .25 caliber weapon last fall. He claimed to have thrown the weapon into a drainage well. Detectives searched the well after Damien provided its location, but found nothing. The investigation continued, and a bullet of the same caliber was later discovered in a chest of drawers. This bullet matched the cartridge case found at the crime scene. However, Without the weapon, it was difficult to formally charge Damien. On November 3, 2003, the case took a significant turn. Jennifer, Damien's ex-girlfriend, went to the authorities and provided a statement about events that had occurred during the summer involving Kinsey, Damien, and herself. The following day, Kinsey was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, she confessed to being involved but claimed the situation had spiraled out of control unintentionally. Her confession provided enough evidence for an arrest, but in exchange for more information, Kinsey was allowed to return home. Once home, she told her mother everything. Her mother, Deborah, was shocked and unable to comprehend how or why her daughter could have committed murder. She was also baffled as to why the authorities had let Kinsey go. Feeling guilty, Kinsey called her boyfriend and confessed everything, including Damien's involvement. Understanding the gravity of the situation, her boyfriend reported it to the authorities. An hour later, Kinsey was arrested, followed by Damien. Both were charged with murder and faced life in prison due to their intentional use of a firearm. Their bail was set at $5 million each to ensure their presence at the trial. On February 17, 2005, the trial of Kinsey and Damien began. The prosecution argued that the crime had been carefully planned and executed with cold-blooded precision. They emphasized that this murder was far more severe than a typical teenage dispute. In his defense, Damien maintained that he never intended to harm Kelly and claimed that Kinsey was directly responsible for Kelly's death. Kinsey's defense, on the other hand, acknowledged the enormity of her mistake, describing it as monstrous, and expressed deep remorse for causing the death of her close friend. On March 9, 2005, Kinsey was convicted of first-degree murder and using a weapon during the crime. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision regarding Damien's involvement, leading to a delay in his case. 2 months later, a hearing was held where the verdict was announced. The judge described the crime as one of the most tragic and senseless cases he had ever encountered. Kinsey was sentenced to 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole and was sent to a women's correctional facility at California in Chino. In May 2005, after reaching a plea agreement, Damien was sentenced to 15 years and incarcerated at Chuckawalla Valley in Blythe. Kelly's grandparents, Dolores and Jesus, were present in the courtroom, their faces showing both sadness and relief. With a trembling voice, Jesus expressed his sorrow at being robbed of the chance to see their granddaughter grow up. Dolores shared that nothing could ever fill the void left in her life. Over time, her health declined significantly, forcing her to leave her job. In February 2014, Dolores passed away. In 2018, Damien was denied parole. However, on October 24, 2019, a special commission unexpectedly approved his parole. In March 2020, California governor reversed this decision, stating that Damien still posed a serious risk to public safety. In January 2023, Damien attended his final parole hearing and was granted parole, which reignited intense debate. County attorney voiced hope that the decision would eventually be overturned. For now, Damien remains in prison, awaiting the final outcome. Kelly Bullwinkle was a model student with a promising future. Her naivety, trust in people, and desire to be accepted by others ultimately led to her death. Kelly did not doubt the trustworthiness of her friends, even after they got her hooked on banned substance and treated her cruelly. Kinsey openly rejected her, put her in a bad light, and eventually took her life in their merciless, bloody game.